Okay, good morning, everyone. We're glad to have you here. My name is Mike Terry. I'd like to welcome you to this regular monthly hearing of the Cobb Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is an advisory board appointed by the Board of Commissioners. We investigate every zoning request and every land use permit request that comes to the county. We do the investigation, we hold this hearing, and then we'll make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. It's important to note, though, that the final and binding decisions are always made by the Board of Commissioners, and they will consider these cases at their next hearing in 2 weeks, which is April 17th. So if you're here for any of these cases today, you'll need to come back on the 17th, same time, right here in this chamber. So that's the way it'll work. And then I'll have some other things to say to you in just a minute. It's our custom to invite various members of the local clergy to come and speak to us or lead us in a prayer or make brief comments as they decide. And so it's my pleasure to introduce to you today Lieutenant Jose Valentin of the Salvation Army. I recognized him because of the uniform. So, Jose, we're glad to have you. Come on up to the podium. As he's getting ready to speak to us, I'll remind you that when he's concluded, I'll invite Officer Skip Ott from the Cobb County Police Department to come forward and lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. So when you see Officer Ott come to the center of the room, please stand as you're able for our pledge. And that's the procedure we'll follow right now. So, Lieutenant, we're glad to have you here. Podium's yours. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Join me pray, please. Dear Father, today is April the 3rd, and we are here meeting in our Son meeting. We thank you for and pray for the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. We thank you for everything and everyone who gather here now. Thank you that you know each one of us by name and have caused us to walk with you. We say that we are dependent on you and our trust is in you completely. As we surrender ourselves in adoration, we ask that you will come by your Holy Spirit and inspire our heart today. We welcome you to this meeting. We give you respect and acknowledge you as our creator and provider. It's you who are omnipresent. You are everywhere, Lord. It is you who are omnipotent. You have all power, and it is you who are omniscient. You know everything. God, as we begin this meeting, we ask that you will guide us, our thoughts, and our actions, so that we may have a successful meeting today. Help us to accomplish our goal while displays your character. We pray this thing in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I've been asked at this time to relinquish the chair to my good friend Dana, who's going to come up and make an announcement for us. Dana?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really just wanted to take a second to let you and the community know how much we appreciate you, sir. We know this is going to be your last meeting as Chair of the Planning Commission, and on behalf of the county manager and on behalf of the staff in the county attorney's office and the clerk's office and community development and all the departments that help support the Planning Commission, we just wanted to say thank you for your leadership, sir. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your guidance that you've given us over the time. And personally, I want to thank you for giving me a lot of good advice over the last many years from our phone conversations when things were coming up. And for me personally, and on behalf of the entire Cobb County team, I want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, for all that you've given for us.
Thank you. Sit down. Sit down. My last order is please be seated.
Thank you,
That
sir.
really was unexpected. I did not know Dana was going to do that. So whatever I say after this is completely winging it. But thank you very much for those kind words. I do appreciate it. I have been doing this for a long time, and I did this for quite a few years in another jurisdiction before I came here. So it's time to let somebody else have a little fun and take the District 2 seat. And that fella's going to be, he's sitting on the front row. Hold your hand up. This is Andy Smith. Andy will be the replacement in District 2. And your new chairperson will be Judy Williams, who's sitting here on my right. We'll pray for both of them. And our vice chair will be Skip, sitting here on my right as well. So we're proud of those two. They've really earned those spots, and we're glad to have them here. You mentioned the staff. I told the group the other day when we had our work session meeting that I really never liked that term. It's all these folks sitting here and around us. Those folks are team members. They're good friends. They've become good friends. We could not operate without the good advice and the help that they offer to us every single day. And this is a job that really goes on every single day, not just the day of the hearing. But those folks are all professional. They're dedicated. Cobb County is fortunate to have them, and I'm glad to call each of them my friends, and I'll be seeing you around. So thank you very much, Dana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now we've got business to conduct here. First on the agenda this morning will be our consent agenda. These are cases that the Planning Commission and the zoning staff have fully investigated, and we're satisfied that all the pertinent issues have been resolved and for which there is no known opposition. The zoning administrator, Mr. John Peterson, this is John holding his hand up to my left, will read these cases into the record, and he'll ask if there's anyone here that is in opposition or wishes to speak to that particular case. If there is, we may elect to pull it from the consent agenda, and then we would hear it in its regular numerical sequence. The next thing we will do is we will hear the cases that were either held or continued from a previous hearing. And then lastly, we will get into our regular cases. Again, all of these are in a regular numerical sequence. Applicants for any of these cases will be asked to identify themselves, to come forward and be sworn in to present their case. Then the opposition will get their chance to do the same. They'll be asked to identify themselves for the record, be sworn in, and then come forward to give your testimony. When a case number is called by Mr. Peterson, all those wishing to address the board will need to be sworn in, and that'll be handled by our officer of the day, Jason Campbell, on the front row. Jason, hold your hand up. So when you're asked, you'll have to come to Mr. Campbell, and he will swear you in. He'll also ask you to sign a book. That's so that we can get the correct spelling of your name for our record. Please be aware, and this is really important, please be aware that each side, both for and against, gets 10 minutes total to speak. That's not 10 minutes per speaker, that's 10 minutes collectively to speak. So be mindful of the length of your comments so that if there are those that want to speak after you, they have time to make their points as well. And remember, at that time, when you're speaking, that is not a rebuttal time. That is your time to make your case to us. We may, however, call you back up if we have some points we need to clarify or questions we need to ask of you. So that's the procedure, and that's how we'll go. Mr. Peterson, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a number of cases on today's printed agenda which have been continued by the staff, will not be heard today. First case is rezoning case Z56 of 2017. Oak Hall Companies LLC. That case has been continued by the staff until the May 1st, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z56 of 2017 will not be heard today. Zoning case Z3 of 2018, Punky Poo LLC. That case was continued by the staff until the May 1st, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z3 of 2018 will not be heard today. Rezoning case Z8 of 2018, Lloyd Development Services. That case was continued by the staff until the May 1st, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z8 would not be heard today. Rezoning case Z20 of 2018, Elevation Development Group LLC. That case was continued by the staff until the May 1st, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z20 would not be heard today. Finally, rezoning case Z21 of 2018, W. Reed Koningsmark. That case was continued by the staff until the May 1st, 2018 Planning Commission zoning hearing. So Z21 will not be heard today. Mr. Chairman, Board, there is one case on today's hearing agenda which the applicant is asking the case to be continued until next month. That's rezoning case Z11, Aziz Farista. The attorney is present, Mr. Chairman, and he is requesting this be continued until your May date.
Yes, on behalf of the applicant, we request that this case be continued to next month's agenda.
Give us your name for the record.
Parks Huff with Sam's Larkin Huff and Valley.
Okay, see, I'm still in charge here, Parks. Okay, so we've asked for a continuance. Galt, do you have any further?
And I support that. There was a mix-up and we didn't get the stipulation letter, so we haven't had time to review and get everything prepared for the case. So I'll make a motion that we continue Z11 till our May hearing.
Okay, we have a second from Ms. Powell. Call for the vote. So we will continue that as well. So just for the record, if you're here for Z56, cases Z56, Z3, Z8, Z20, 21, and now also Z11, those cases will not be heard today. Okay, John, what else, please?
Yes, sir. I would like to ask the people in today's audience, if you have a cell phone, please turn the volume off on your cell phone. The ringing does interfere with broadcast and presentations, so if you have a cell phone, please turn the volume off on it. Any person wishing to speak before the Board of Commissioners must file a campaign contribution disclosure statement. If within the 2 years immediately preceding the filing of a rezoning application, a campaign contribution totaling $250 or more was made to a current member of the Board of Commissioners. Additional information about this requirement is located on the table at the back of the room. And I want to remind applicants, opposition, or any interested party that information is due to this board the Wednesday prior to the hearing. Any information submitted after the Wednesday due date may or may not be considered by the board at their discretion. I do have some requests for early head counts. Can I get a show of people here who are opposed to rezoning case Z7 2018 3103 ND LLC? Please raise your hands.
Okay, if you're opposed to Z7, put your hands up so we can get a count. Leave them up till we get an accurate count, please.
And let the record show there's 4 people opposed. Can I get a show of people here who are in support of rezoning case?
Hold on just a minute. I saw some late hands go up. That was case Z7, which is that's the Oakdale Road, South Cobb Drive zoning. If you're opposed to Z7, let's see your hands. Okay, I think you're opposed to Z7 back in the room. There are 2 storage facilities on today's agenda. This is the one that sits between Oakdale Road and South Cobb Drive. Okay, so we have 1 additional, so that would be 5 opposed.
Okay. And can I get a show of people here who are in support of rezoning case Z7 2018 3103 ND LLC? Let the record show there are 4 people here in support of that rezoning case.
Thank you, folks.
Can I get a show of people here who are opposed to rezoning case Z16 of 2018 Vining Storage LLC? Please raise your hands. Let the record show there are 14 people here opposed to rezoning case Z16 of 2018. Can I also get a show of people here who are in support of rezoning case Z16 of 2018 Vining Storage? Please raise your hands. Let the record show there's no one here to support that application. And lastly, rezoning case,
Except the attorney, but doesn't count. Doesn't count. Okay.
and lastly, can I get a show of people here who are opposed to rezoning case Z22 of 2018 Fortress Builders LLC? Please raise your hands. Let the record show there are 13 people here opposed to rezoning case Z22. And can I also get a show of people here who are in support of rezoning case Z22 of 2018? Please raise your hands. Let the record show there are 5 people here in support.
Well,
Okay. Can I get a show of people here who are opposed to rezoning case Z12 of 2018, Lloyd Development Services? Please raise your hands.
That's the Shallowford Road zoning.
One opposed. Can I get a show of people here who are in support of rezoning case Z12 of 2018? Let the record shows no one here in support.
And for those that held your hands up, some of these cases will be toward the end of the agenda today, so if you need to leave, that's perfectly fine. You've registered your opposition, and we have a record of that. We hope you'll stick around, but if not, we understand. Okay, John, go ahead, please.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to start the consent agenda. Cobb County Planning Commission zoning hearing consent agenda for April 3rd, 2018. Rezoning case Z17, Patinos LLC, request rezoning from LRO to CRC for the purpose of retail in land lots 787 and 788 of the 19th District. The property is located on the north side of East-West Connector, east of Powder Springs Road. Staff recommends approval to the CRC zoning district, subject to the following conditions. Site plan received by the zoning division on December 12th, 2017, with the district commissioner approving minor modifications. Variance mentioned in the zoning comments, water and sewer division comments and recommendations, stormwater management division comments and recommendations, and Department of Transportation comments and recommendations. Is the applicant present? The director show the applicant is here. Is there anyone here opposed? Rezoning case Z17. Let the record show there's no one opposed, and that completes the consent agenda, Mr. Chairman and Board.
Okay, thank you, John.
And I have some additions to that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, John, if you have anything else to add. This is your
Okay.
case.
Yes. In addition to what's already read in, all stipulations in the letter received from Garvis L. Sams Jr. dated March 15th, 2018, not otherwise in conflict. The following uses only shall be allowed: banks and financial institutions, clinics, community retail uses, corporate or administrative offices, eating establishments, laundry and dry cleaning pickup establishments, neighborhood retail uses, offices, not elsewhere classified, and professional offices. Next stipulation, the list of prohibited uses found in the stipulation letter still apply. The building to have four-sided architectural features with particular attention paid to the rear elevation due to the proximity to the entrance driveway. Elevations of all four sides to be provided for approval by the district commissioner. The location of the building can be adjusted during plan review if necessary due to sewer easement requirements. Any move of more than 30 feet requires approval of the district commissioner. For the purposes of this stipulation, the minor modification restrictions do not apply. In other words, they can move it a little closer to an R20. And the last one is alcohol sales only in conjunction with a restaurant. No more than 33% of the business sales to be from alcohol sales, and no alcohol sales after 11 p.m. And I'll just note, this does not grant in any way a license to serve alcohol. They still have to go through the normal process for that. And that's the modifications to that, and all these have been reviewed with Mr. Sams, and I believe he's fine with all of them.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, Garvis Sams with Sams, Larkin, Huff, and Ballard. Mr. Porter and I have discussed these at length, and we're satisfied with them as additional conditions of zoning. If you'll notice in the stipulation letter, they're prohibitive uses, but should a developer want to come back and perhaps change it, have to come through the zoning process again. But we're satisfied with what Mr. Porter and I have crafted.
Okay. I haven't made a motion yet. I'll make a motion that we, you're so quick.
Moving right along.
I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as amended.
Okay.
Okay.
We have 2 seconds, but we're good. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please register your vote. Okay, so that is added to the consent agenda. So that's Z17. Thank you
Thank
very
you, Mr.
much.
Chairman.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Porter.
Sams.
Mr. Chairman and Board, the next case, or the first case on your agenda, also has a special land use permit. Would it be the board's wishes to hear both cases together?
I think we can do that. We'll have to make a separate motion on the two, but we can
Correct.
hear it together.
Okay, I'll call them together
Yes,
then.
that's fine.
Rezoning case Z7 3103 ND LLC, request rezoning from R20 to NRC for the purpose of a climate-controlled self-service storage facility, office and retail in land lots 690, 691, 750, and 751 of the 17th District. The property is located on the west side of Oakdale Road and on the east side of South Cobb Drive. Additionally, it does have a special land use permit, which is SLEP 2 3103 ND LLC. Request a special land use permit for the purpose of a climate-controlled self-service storage facility and office retail in land lot 690 and 691, 750 and 751 of the 17th District. The property is located on the west side of Oakdale Road and on the east side of South Cobb Drive. The applicant is present. Earlier, there were 5 people here opposed and 4 people in support. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
If you're not sure, but you may want to speak, come on up and let's get you sworn in at this time. You don't, doesn't mean you have to speak, let's just get it done. Thank you. Ms. Battle, whenever you're ready, just give us your name for the record when you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Battle. I'm with Battle Law in Decatur, Georgia, and I'm here representing the applicant. We are happy to come here this morning to discuss the proposed project off of South Cobb, between South Cobb and Oakdale Road. The property is a 2.497 acre tract that is currently zoned R20. And as currently zoned, there is a single-family house that's on the property. The property is currently vacant and we believe no longer suitable for residential use on the site is currently zoned. We are seeking to rezone to NRC, which as the property currently has a land use designation of NAC. And we believe that the rezoning to NRC for use as both a self-storage facility and primarily office slash kind of accessory retail use is an appropriate use for the subject property. My client is in the storage business. It seems like it's a very popular thing to do these days. He believes that this is an excellent site for the opportunity for the property to be utilized in this manner. One of the things that we have done is we've tried to reach out to the community. We've had 2 community meetings, which gave us an opportunity to present this matter to those in the surrounding area. As a result of those meetings, we initially had a set of stipulations that we provided to you all a couple of weeks ago prior to what was going to be our prior appearance here. But as a result of some delays, we ended up deferring that matter to this agenda. Last week on Thursday evening, we actually had an opportunity to have our second meeting with the community, and as a result of that meeting, there were some additional conditions added to the 12 proposed stipulations that had been provided to you on February 26. And I would like to note those additional conditions. One, that with regards to the overall site plan, and I don't know if I can move around here. Great. Fabulous. With regards to the site plan, just to give you some context, we've got South Cobb Drive here, Oakdale Road on the backside. There are residential homes that are in this area behind the subject property. What's interesting about this particular site is that it really falls to the middle of the site, such that there's a higher elevation along the Oakdale Road side, and it drops off as you go down towards South Cobb Drive. The intent here with the self-storage facility is to build a 92,400 square foot building. The look and architecture of that building is shown here. And as you can see, we're looking at kind of a brick and stucco-ish type facade on the building. Those are faux windows that you're seeing along with some insets to give it a little pop along the frontage. The building itself, initially we were looking at a 48-foot high building. However, as a result of comments that we received from the community, we have opted to reduce that height to 35 feet, and that is shown in the special stipulations that we had, proposed stipulations that we have provided to you. Additionally, with regards to the office retail type building, it would be a single-story building at 25 feet in height, so they'll have a little higher ceiling, but it will still be a one-story facility. With regards to that particular building, it is this particular applicant's desire to do more of medical type use within the building with some accessory retail alongside it. So you may have such as a cafe or a sandwich shop or something of that nature, maybe a telephone store, but nothing of a high end. And so what we also agreed to in terms of the use of the property is that we wouldn't have any type of drive-through facility that would be located on or connected in with that portion of the property. In looking at the property, because of the elevations, what you can see on the rear is that the building will actually sit low, and one of the conditions that we have was to kind of keep the existing grade of the site so that off of the Oakdale Road side, it will look more like a two-story building versus a three-story building off of Oakdale Road. Additionally, on the site plan, you'll see that we have added in a landscape strip along the rear in order to provide additional screening, which is required anyway under the zoning conditions, but we will be extending that along the entire perimeter of the Oakdale Road side up through where the building here, there's a deep kind of drop and ravine over on this area. So the landscape strip will actually go all the way through, which is one of the comments that we received at the community meeting on Thursday. Additionally, they asked for some decorative fencing around the end along this side as well. I wanted to, again, go over the special stipulations quickly and the changes from what you all had originally seen. Sorry, double dipping there. The landscape strip, again, would be along the entire length of Oakdale Road. We also had to go through, because this property is directly across from Chupay Park, and so Chupay Park, excuse me. And there was question as to whether or not there was an existing Chupay on the property. We actually had a study done, an archaeological study conducted by R.S. Webb. The results of that have been turned over to the county. We believe that under the review that was conducted, that the conclusion was that there was nothing currently on site, and I probably should read into the record directly. The conclusion that the Chupay that once stood in the project area has been disturbed to the extent that it is no longer distinguishable as such, and the remains of this feature have limited interpretive value. A comparison with known Chupays located immediately east of Oakdale Road strongly reinforces this point. In Chupay Park, the intact Chupay walls are 5 to 8 feet in height and exhibit clearly defined angles with a ditch outlining the offensive faces, with limited interpretive verbiage, a visitor can clearly understand the intended function of a Confederate Chupade, the battlefield engineering required to construct it, and the tactics behind its use. Based on the results of the current study, the earthen feature and environs within the project area do not retain the integrity necessary to allow meaningful interpretation of Civil War features to the public, and no additional work is recommended. And so based on that, we have had meetings with those that are seeking to protect the area. And we added in at their request that in addition to providing the pedestrian access that we have proposed and shown on the site plan, that we would also allow signage to be erected on the site, and that the owner would be willing to pay for up to $1,000 of the cost for that particular signage. Additionally, we added in the following requests. One, that no signage for the project would be erected on Oakdale Road, that we would maintain a 6-foot black aluminum picket fence along the back on Oakdale Road. There would be surveillance cameras erected throughout the property, particularly in the parking area off of Oakdale Road. That there would be outdoor lighting provided, and we gave some conditions under which that lighting would be erected so that it would be downward facing and wouldn't result in glare on the properties along Oakdale Road. That we would show, and I believe we were already required to have sidewalks along Oakdale Road, that the hours of operation would be 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., that the hours of operation, that's for the self-storage, for the operations for the office retail would be 8 a.m. to 10. Construction hours would be limited to 7 a.m. until 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday with no construction on Sunday, and that there would be no construction entrance off of Oakdale Road. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, but we, as staff has recommended approval, we would ask for similar approval of both the rezoning and the use permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Let's hear from the opposition now, please.
Good morning. I'm Mary Rose Barnes from Oakdale Community Association. This case has been excruciating from day one. There have been numerous procedural lapses on the part of the applicant, and in spite of the fact that the case was continued because of improper notification of the neighbors, we only received the one and only stipulation letter, 9:34 last night. In addition to this morning, Ms. Battle just said that that property is vacant. It is not. It is occupied. Just another mistake. This application is an NRC in name only. It is for all intents and purposes a CRC with the undisclosed variances of 92,400 square foot building versus a 70,000 allowed for code, 3 stories versus the code limit of 2 stories, and a 12-foot setback to South Cobb in lieu of 50 feet. As such, it fails to meet the concept of the NAC land use plan and is not in keeping with our neighborhood of quality homes and appropriately scaled office buildings. A massive flat roof building cannot possibly meet the NRC code requirement for compatibility with the neighboring pitched roof buildings, office buildings, the largest of which is 6,000 square feet. Please note, I'm sorry, I'm not good at handouts. Please note our handout, an excerpt of the applicant's revised statement of intent, which clearly states that the applicant's admission that this property is indeed incompatible with the neighborhood. Nor would it provide for our neighbors provide properly for our neighbors, as there are an ample number of storage buildings already in the immediate area. The applicant has refused our urgent request for a core sample to determine if blasting should be necessary. Properties on 3 sides of this property have had to blast or pile drive, and there's an active plantation gas pipeline directly adjacent. If there should be blasting on our site, our whole neighborhood would be in danger. Keep in mind that the county recently eliminated the county blasting code. The inexplicable lapse on the part of the applicant is intolerable. Safety should be #1 criteria in zoning applications. While Ms. Battle told us that the applicant would abide by all NRC requirements for self-storage facilities, applicant clearly lacks application clearly lacks required permanent buffering to the loading dock at the front of the building and lack a sufficient turnaround for tractor trailers. The very concept of loading docks directly on F-rated South Cobb Drive is irresponsible, especially with a minuscule 12-foot front setback. There would inevitably be traffic conflicts with customers of the smaller building, whatever use that would be. The applicant has chosen to place the largest section, the rear of the building, adjacent to a commercial neighbor without the benefit of a landscape buffer. This permanent placement will be an eyesore, limit the quality of future development on the north side of the property, and lower the property values of adjacent properties. The incomprehensible combination of a medical facility and sandwich shop, or whatever, in the second building is a further reason to oppose this application. This overly dense project without the proper compatibility or concern for the safety and welfare of our neighborhood is not acceptable. The appropriate designation for the property is low-rise office. It would allow an appropriate use for residential and business owners and provide the correct use relative to traffic concerns on South Cobb Drive. OCA Board respectfully requests that you recommend a deletion to LRO. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Roberta Cook. I'm Executive Director of the Riverline Historic Area. We have two interests here as a historic area. As Michelle mentioned, there is a remnant of a shoepade on that property. It is quite large. The Cobb County owns Shoepade Park across the street from the property, and the Riverline Historic Area does have tours periodically at the park. On the interpretive sign at the entrance to the park is Shoepade number 1, which is located on the applicant's property. So there is interpretive value to that shoepade, although it doesn't have its defining characteristics. It does have value as a land formation and a landmark, and we do point to that while we conduct tours. So we are asking, if this application is approved, that a portion of the shoepade be saved. We haven't received an answer on that. Also, we would like an interpretive sign, and I'm delighted that the applicant has offered some financing on that. And Michelle didn't mention, at least I didn't hear her, that she has been trying to cooperate with us as far as event parking for Shoepade Park. There's only 4 parking spaces there right now. So when we have tours and events, there's no place for people to park. There's no parking on Oakdale Road. The large subdivisions out there have very small pods for parking. So what we do is we use an office building across the street. But for people to get there, they have to drive a half a mile around to South Cobb Drive to park there, just to cross the street. So we're looking for a solution for that. Now, Michelle did offer pedestrian access and allowing us to use their parking lot. So that does help in that respect. So with that, those were the concerns from our group. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Do we have another speaker, please? We had several that stood up. Anybody else want to speak? Okay, not seeing any. We'll go ahead and close this portion of the hearing. This is in District 2, so I'll handle the discussion on this. This, as you've heard, this has been an interesting case. It's been going on for more than 60 days. We've had lots of time for us to look at it. I don't disagree, and I want to go on record right off the bat. I don't disagree with this use. I think this type of use for this spot might be the best use. If you consider what could go there, depending on the zoning that would be granted. I mean, we could have high-rise office, we could have retail shopping, we could have lots of things that would generate quite a bit more noise, light, and traffic. The climate control self-storage business generally does not do that. It generally is a low-key type business with only a few cars per day coming and going, rarely at the peak rush hour times of morning and afternoon. So from that standpoint, this might be a good place for this if certain things were accomplished. We review these cases for self-storage buildings often. We're going to hear another one here in just a few minutes, in fact. We've done dozens of these, if not hundreds, over the time that I've been on the Planning Commission. And so we kind of have a feel for what we need to look for and what needs to be there to make a good and successful business. And I find this whole application to be very problematic. We normally do have a very detailed stipulation letter early in the process. The first stipulation letter that was presented to us several weeks ago was 2.5 pages long, and one of those pages was just simply a list of disallowed uses, which means the actual stip letter itself was really only 1.5 pages. It did not contain the detail that we look for, despite us giving Ms. Battle all the things that we normally like to see in a stipulation letter. It just didn't happen. Now, I'm not saying this is her fault, because frankly, I know that she tried really hard to work with the applicant that she represents, her client, and he was a little slow in forthcoming with some answers that we needed. But the stip letter, frankly, just didn't have the detail. And then we get a stip letter last night at about 9:30 p.m. Now, I don't know how these other planning commissioners work, but I stopped taking emails, returning phone calls, or reading anything the day before the hearing. You have to. You just can't keep doing that. You have to have time to prepare. And so none of us have seen this stip letter. Some of us sitting up here just got it a few minutes ago, and so we haven't had time to look at it. Now, Michelle read into the record some of the things that were added that were not in the first stip letter, and that's all good. There's time for you to present that to the Board of Commissioners, but we're not going to be able to accept that this morning. That would be my recommendation to the Planning Commission, because frankly, we just got it, so there's no way we can read it, analyze it, and understand it. Also, the renderings that we received, in other words, what is the building going to look like? The first one we got was so small and lacking of detail, it was pretty meaningless. The second one we got, which was in color, which we saw presented a minute ago, was much better, but still lacking in some detail. So I find that to be lacking. The site plan itself was another issue. As I said, this is probably not a bad use for this particular piece of property, but the way it was configured on the site plan and the way the building sat on the site just didn't seem to be right to me. It ran in the wrong direction so that it was closer to Oakdale Road, and the goal should be to get it farther away from Oakdale Road. Oakdale Road, as we heard pronounced a minute ago, has lots of single-family residential houses, apartments, condos, detached houses, and so forth. Lots of them right there on Oakdale Road. So you want to be as far away from that as you can, but the building was positioned such that it sort of scooted back toward Oakdale Road. I think it should have been turned 90 degrees in the other direction. It also didn't seem to have the detail on the site plan that we like to look for. Where is this loading dock that we just heard about? I think I know where it is, but I'm not really sure. And I agree that it's really, if it's where I think it is, it's positioned incorrectly on the building. It should have been around the corner. I didn't see a place for trucks to turn around or park, and there will be trucks coming and going from this. So that was problematic. So that was of grave concern. And then there's the landscaping. We did ask early on for, if this is approved, we need some pretty heavy landscaping along Oakdale Road as a buffer. I wanted a berm, 3 or 4 feet tall minimum, planted along the entire length of Oakdale Road. The plan that we first saw didn't have anything, and then it was resubmitted a second time with about half the plan showing some plantings on it, but not the whole plan. If we're going to do that, it needs to run all the way down Oakdale Road. So that, again, was another problem. It was difficult to determine the height of all the buildings. I would much prefer to have one building on this site and let that be the climate control self-storage building and not have the second building. But the height of both those buildings, to my mind, is still in question. Is it 2 stories above grade and 1 below? Is it 3 stories above grade and 1 below? We've heard 48 feet mentioned in the initial application, which has now been changed to 35 feet. I don't know. I really don't know what we have. It just wasn't made clear from the beginning, and the late submission of a stip letter is not something we can look at now. We just don't have time to look at that. The second building, the smaller building, roughly 9,000 square feet, what really is that going to be? We heard early on probably medical offices. Then we heard maybe some low impact, low intensity retail, maybe a cafe, a restaurant, lots of maybes. Maybe we'll keep it, maybe we'll sell it. So again, not really specified, no specificity at all. Let's just put it that way. So that, I didn't like that at all. I'm glad to see that if this is approved, that the applicant will put up a sign identifying the Shoepade as having been on this site. For those who don't know, Google Shoepade, you'll have your eyes opened. It was a very significant type of Civil War fort that, had it been utilized, which it was not, had it been utilized, it would have turned the Civil War on it, at least the Battle of Atlanta would have turned it on its head. But it wasn't. But it's very significant. So I'm glad to see that if BOC does approve this, that at least we'll have a sign there of some kind. Based on the information that I have, or lack of information, I believe we need a more detailed site plan. I believe we need one building only. I believe it needs to be positioned differently on the site. I believe we need more details about the landscaping and the fencing. I believe we need more detailed renderings. So what we have is not sufficient for me to make a recommendation for approval, and my suggestion is going to be for denial of Z7, and that would be my motion.
Second.
We have a second from Thea. Any further discussion? Okay, Skip.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment that unless I'm misreading this, the email that we got last night at 9:34 with the stip letter that stip letter was changed this morning with at least 2 changes from, for what we got delivered to us here this morning. The date was changed, and there were a couple of typos that were changed. And I don't know what else was changed, but it's kind of hard to deal with that much change going on right to the last minute. I just want to make that comment.
Okay, anybody else?
I'll just add a couple comments. One is, and applicants are well aware of this, those letters were due in last Wednesday by noon. So it's not unreasonable that we're saying, giving it to us at that hour. I also found the renderings to be very misleading. They showed probably a 50-foot setback instead of the 12 that the site plan shows, with parking in front and landscaping and things that just wouldn't be on this plan. I tend to agree with Mike that there's way too much happening on this parcel, that the self-storage should have been brought down to comply with the code in size all the way around. There's no parking for it. It's just a really poorly laid out site plan. So I would agree that and I know there's been a lot of conversation back and forth in time, and we've continued the case. So there's been plenty of time for the applicant to work and get this right. So I don't know that holding it would help. So I agree with Mike on the denial.
And I would remind people, before we take our vote, I would remind people that this still has 2 weeks before it goes to the Board of Commissioners. With the direction that we've given today from all of us, it's possible that this could make it in different form to the Board of Commissioners, and they may see it differently. Okay, so this is not a dead issue. So those of you that are here will need to come back for that hearing and see how it goes. And Michelle, you'll just need to contact the BOC, especially Commissioner Ott, talk to him about it and see what can be worked out. We have a motion, we have a second, no further discussion. John, did you have something?
Well, and just to clarify, this is just for the zoning case, that the special land use permit needs a separate motion.
We'll need a separate motion on that, yes. So this is just for the Z7 case. Let's call for the vote. So we're going to deny that. Now, this particular type of use does require a special land use permit. Nothing changes from what we just said and from what Ms. Battle just presented to us. So we need a motion to also deny the special land use permit, and so moved. I'll need a second for that.
I'll second that.
So we have a second. Let's call for the vote on that. So that is also denied. So you'll need to come back in a couple of weeks, and we'll see how it goes from there. Thank you very much, folks. John, what's next, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Rezoning case Z12, Lloyd Development Services request a rezoning from R30 to RA5 for the purpose of a residential subdivision in land lots 66 and 67 in the 16th district. The property is located on the northwest side of Shalford Road, north of Shallow Ridge Road. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed rezoning case? Well, earlier, there was one person opposed rezoning case Z12. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
Okay, if you think you want to testify on this one, Z12, come on up and let's get you sworn in. Anybody? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
While Garvis is getting set up, I'll remind everybody, if you do choose to leave after your case is heard, we understand that. Please do so quietly and quickly through the back, because we're going to jump right into our next case, and we are televised, so we need to do that quickly and quietly. Garvis, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and members of the Planning Commission. For the record, my name is Garvis Sams. I'm with the law firm of Sams, Larkin, Huff, and Bally, and represent Lloyd Development Services in connection with this application. I have with me this morning Mr. John Lloyd. He's the principal, the namesake of the company, but he's also a civil engineer. So he wears several hats, and he'll be available to respond to any questions, as will I. Also, his associate, Trace Copeland, is here today. So between the three of us, we should be able to field whatever questions that may come from either you or members of the public. And feel free to stop me at any juncture during the presentation. It won't hurt any continuity as far as my presentation. This is an application that was scheduled to be heard and considered last month. But as we got closer to the deadline for submitting documents and whatnot, rather than hurry it, we continued our dialogue with the staff, with the district planning commissioner, and with area residents. We've had a smattering of interests, not necessarily orchestrated or organized, but nevertheless, we're surrounded, this property is, by, as you can see, pretty heavy density residential development. The subject property is outlined in blue. As you can see, this is a approximate 6.1 acre tract of land located on the north western side of Shallowford Road. The blue outlines the property, and you can see, and once you see the site plan on a lot-to-lot basis, we have good ratios on all four sides. And all three sides that you see residential, and of course that's everything except for Shallowford Road, that's zone PD. PD is a classification called planned development that was a precursor to the planned residential development, neither one of which still technically exists in terms of being able to apply for them, but they do exist to the extent that they're in your books and there are ordinance requirements. But PD that surrounds us on three sides has a minimum house lot size of 8,000 square feet. We've done calculations on that development, which is known as Falcon Crest. There's 142 lots within that subdivision that surrounds us on three sides. They range in size from 8,111 square feet up to 24,600 square feet. But the average lot size of all 142 lots is 10,476 feet. And the density there is 0.05, that's 5/100ths of a unit less than our average square footage. What Mr. Lloyd is asking to do here is to rezone this property from R20, R30 to R12. Originally, the application sought a rezoning to the RA5 district for a total number of 20 lots, but that took our density up to 3.3 units per acre, which didn't comport with the density that surrounds us. So we were able to revise the site plan to a classification that's used, the R12. We did do a PD plan. It wasn't real pretty, but we were able to max out 20 lots, so at that 3+ unit per acre density. But we just felt like with the manner in which the zoning ordinance has evolved, it'd be more appropriate if we could have something that more closely aligned and exceeded in terms of lot size, but was the equivalent in terms of density for the subdivision that surrounds us on three sides. This is the revised site plan. Same piece of property. We had multiple points of access. Now you can see one point of ingress and egress on Shallowford Road. We're following DOT's recommendations with respect to the voluntary donation and conveyance of right-of-way, the consolidation to this one point of ingress and egress, a deceleration lane, some of the typical things you would see. There'll be one street on the inside of this subdivision. The price points of these houses is going to be a breath of fresh air for this section of the Shallowford Road corridor. The price points will range from the low 400s to the low 500s and potentially greater than that. And we haven't had price points at that ilk or at that level since this PD development, Falcon Crest, was developed back in 1986, approximately 32 years ago. And comparatively speaking, and looking at all 142 lots in Falcon Crest and the tax implications on those, I found now these are tax assessor values, so not necessarily fair market value, but values ranging in tax assessors from 140 up to 180 to give you an idea of the price points there. This is the revised site plan. We also have, of course, as you can see, to work within the confines of the future land use map. Obviously, the subdivision that surrounds us fights the future land use map, which allows densities up to 2.5. It is at 2.87. We are at 2.95, as I mentioned, whatever that math is, but it's hundredths of a unit. And since this application's been pending, we've had the sporadic calls from neighbors, most of whom have been satisfied once they learned the price points, the architectural style and composition of the homes, and also once they learned just exactly how they would or would not be impacted. This is kind of turned on its axis, but if you see the cutoff on the top of that plat, this is the plat for Falcon Crest from 1983. Several of the homeowners that are here today either have direct contiguity or are adjacent to, but this shows you the density of what surrounds us on all three sides. This is the black and white version of the plan that you saw earlier on. Getting back to the configuration of properties, it's a mixed bag up in this part of Shallowford Road, where it kind of veers off at Kent. This is going north of that. What's on the property now is an old farmhouse, and it's never been subdivided. It's never been up for rezoning. So this is the first time that you're seeing this, or that anyone in the county has seen it with respect to an entitlement type of circumstance. Told you the price points. The house size will range from 2,200 square feet to 3,200 square feet and greater, hence the 4 to 5s and price points. Architectural style and composition is going to be four-sided architecture. That doesn't necessarily mean identical on four sides, but equal treatment on four sides. And that gives you one example. That gives another. They're front-loaded product, much like the sister homes in Falcon Crest, because of the configuration and size of the lot. That seems to be the prevalent architectural style. We'll be setting up a mandatory HOA with covenants, conditions, and restrictions with strict architectural controls. My stipulation letter describes in more detail the architectural composition: brick, stack stone, hardy plank, hardy shake, the same type of materials that you're seeing here, and the same type of materials that you see on high-end residential development. I do have, I think, the authority to speak on behalf of the 4 or 5 people who are here today. And in order to address those, since they're not written down and were just hammered out, if this is oriented in north-south orientation, if you look to the western side of our property, they have asked for, and we have agreed to, a 6-foot opaque decorative privacy fence along that western property line, and then In addition to that, a 10-foot undisturbed buffer behind lots 6 through 10, if you can see that. So that seems to have ameliorated, lessened, if not totally obviated, the concerns that we have heard. I think on all other levels, everyone is satisfied. We've got the required guest parking, as you can see, which is required for houses that are within or a little less than 20 feet between homes. Sewer is not located within Chalford Road, which was brought to my attention by Mr. Davidson, but is within a short distance from here on a side street. There's an abundance of sewer capacity in the area. Our landscape plan will incorporate the two components that I just mentioned that are not written down, and of course, a variable plethora of other things, such as subdivision entrance signage will be ground-based, monument style, irrigated, lighted landscape, and incorporated into the landscape plan. All HVAC and mechanical systems will be underground. We've built in the usual circumstances where the district commissioner can make minor modifications. So based upon these dramatic changes since the last time we were before you, we do ask that you allow this breath of fresh air to come into this section of Shalford Road corridor, and that you as a planning commission recommend to the board that it be approved as submitted, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sams. You did good. You only went over 12 seconds.
Thanks, sir.
That's good for you.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, just for the record, anyone else here wishing to speak to Z12? Okay, not seeing and hearing any. It's one, okay. Were you sworn in, sir? If not, let's do that. Give us your name, please.
My name is Howard Wishnia.
Go right ahead.
All right, I'm a resident of Falcon Hills, not Falcon Crest, just to correct the records on that, which is the adjacent community, one of the residents there. I've spoken with many of our residents that live in Falcon Hills and the other adjacent community. Initially, when it was a RA5, we were adamantly opposed to it. We were not aware that there was any modifications. Obviously, the yellow sign is 15 feet or so back from the roadside at 35 miles an hour speed zone. You really can't tell what's going on. So we did show up today. We met with Mr. Lloyd. We discussed it. He made modifications for us with regards to changes, being the privacy fence, some explanations of the buffers, et cetera. With the changes that have gone on at this point in time, myself, two of the other neighbors that are with me here today that were adamantly opposed as well, are in favor of the community going in at this point with the adjustments that are put on record at this point in time.
Howard, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak to Z12? Okay, not seeing and hearing anyone. Judy, I believe this is yours, isn't it? You want to handle our discussion, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This case, originally, we thought there wasn't going to be any opposition, but I'm glad to see that the two sides got together and worked out this. I had received last night a letter, it came in last night, from the Bells Ferry Civic Association, thinking that this was a similar case to the one that we had at Piedmont and Cajun, and wanted to stick to the land use plan. If we remember the one at Piedmont and Cajun last month, that land use plan, if we had stuck with the land use plan, it called for it to be medium density. We didn't stick with the land use plan. We rejected it because it didn't fit in with the neighborhood. Land use plan is a guide. We use it as a guide. If it was written in stone, then we wouldn't need a zoning ordinance. So it's always there for us to tell us how we think the area should project in a way. So this area completely is an older established residential area, completely surrounded by PD development, which back in that time was used quite a bit. So I'm glad to see that the homeowners have come to a conclusion. I think the R12, it was not the right place for an RA, that's true, but our R12 fits in the lots nicely back up to the other lots. You have some 8,000 square foot lots in the adjacent subdivisions. So I think with the stipulation letter that we have and the stipulations that were agreed upon by the residents, that I would like to make a motion that we approve this for R12 with subject to Garvey Sam's letter of March 22nd, 2018, with a revised strip of the 6-foot opaque fence on the western property line, 10-foot undisturbed buffer through lots through 6 through 10, landscape plan around the detention pond, and the subdivision entrance to be approved by the district commissioner.
No second for discussion.
And I assume all staff comments and,
All staff, yeah, that
Okay.
was meant. All staff comments and recommendation.
okay, we have a second from Skip. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
I'll just throw it, wrong button. Do you want to put that on the consent
I
for the
think so now that
BOC?
now that those 3 items have been clarified,
Yeah.
that I'd like to also add it to the consent agenda.
For the BOC. Second, okay with that?
Yes.
Any further discussion?
I have just one.
Thea?
Mr. Sams, I just have a quick question, and if we could get the bird's eye view back? The other one that shows this little, what I think is a lake, because
Aerial photography or?
there's another one.
What's it look like?
Well, it shows more detail. Go back one. There you go.
That one?
Garbus, I was going to ask you about what looks like a little lake there to the rear. Is that where the detention is going to be, or what's going to happen? I mean, I have no idea if it's a pond or a lake or how it functions.
No, ma'am, it's not, and the actual detention is better depicted on the color site plan, which is right there. It's on the northern part of the property. There's 1, 2, it's the 3rd lot removed from Shallowford Road. In our discussions with David Braden in the Stormwater Management Division, that's the most appropriate place for that. So we have a stipulation in there that any other bodies of water downstream of this will be investigated with respect to pre-development sedimentation and post-development sedimentation. So we've assumed a responsibility if there are any, but that is detention, not the pond to which you make reference.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
That's actually, hold on, Garvis, that's actually a good question. Is that a current pond? You can't see it from the street. Is that a pond or a lake back there?
It's not a blue line pond. That we've walked the site with Frank Gibson, and my client is here and can protect and correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, he said that's true. It is not a pond.
But does have standing water in it, right?
This is John Lloyd. I'm going to swear him in.
Just-
So lawyers don't have to be sworn in, but witnesses do.
This is allowed, by the way, folks.
Chickens, hen house, you know.
Yeah, we trust you. Give us your name for the record, please.
John Lloyd.
Okay, tell us about that. Is that a lake or a pond? Does it have standing water in it, or what's your intent with that?
It does not have standing water in it. The site was part of a larger farm at one point in time. I don't know if at one point they were holding water in it. Years ago, the pond was from the 1930s.
Okay, that's all we need to know. Because if it does have standing water in it and has always had, then we have an issue. I think Thea correctly identified that.
Understood.
From the 10,000-foot view, it looks like a pond. Corps of Engineers has to get involved, and that is never a good thing, so.
I think we established at the work session from Dave Braden at that time that it wasn't standing water, and I think Frank Gibson also went out there.
Okay,
So
we're good.
It's fine. It's
We're
just
good.
where the detention needs to be.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, an amended motion, I might add. You have something else? No. Okay, let's call for the vote. Okay, so that's the way we'll go. Thank you very much, 5-0.
Thank you. So that, you have recommended to be on the consent agenda for the BOC?
Yes.
Right, that was on the motion, or in the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Peterson, what's next, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The next case also has a special land use permit with, Mr. Chairman. Would it be the board's desire to hear both cases together?
Yes, this will be like the other case we heard. We'll hear both at the same time and then have separate motions on those.
Okay.
This will be a doozy.
Rezoning case Z16, Vining Storage LLC requests a rezoning from RMR and CRC to RRC for the purpose of a climate-controlled self-service storage facility in land lot 844 of the 17th district. The property is located on the north side of Mount Wilkinson Parkway, on the east side of Spring Hill Parkway, and on the west side of I-285. Additionally, a special land use permit, SLEP 4, Vining Storage LLC, request a special land use permit for the purpose of a climate-controlled self-service storage facility in land lot 844, the 17th district. Property is located on the north side of Mount Wilkinson Parkway, on the east side of Spring Hill Parkway, and on the west side of I-285. The applicant is present. Earlier, there were 14 people here opposed to these two cases. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
Let's get you all sworn in at one time, please. We'll hear from him first, and then I'll call you up, okay? No, I've got this. Y'all have these. We have that.
This is, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, my name is Garvis Sams with the law firm of Sams, Larkin, Huff, and Bally, and I represent Mr. Tom Linder in Bindings Storage LLC concerning this application. I have Mr. Linder, who is here with me today. We also have Mr. David Blumenthal, who's a civil engineer with Travis Pruitt and Associates, and also Mr. Abdul Amir, a PE, and a traffic engineer with his own company, A&R Engineering. If those gentlemen could just raise your hand. So we're seated, as you can see, fairly close to the front here. I've handed out, or the clerks have been kind enough to hand out several things. First of all, just a typical handout that shows aerial photos and zoning maps and whatnot. But the other one, the more substantive one, is a book wherein Mr. Linder, for his climate-controlled self-service storage facility in Dunwoody, in 2007, won the national award for that facility. Now, if you look on the interior of it, which is what most people never get, I mean, it is laid out like exquisite professional offices. That's the office component of it. If you look at the exterior, you can see it's cutting edge in terms of its attractiveness and aesthetic features. And this is the direction in which climate facilities are going. I'm representing Mr. Linder and Vining Storage in connection with both this application and the special land use permit application. So what I'd like to do, instead of duplicating grounds, as Mr. Peterson has suggested, we'll cover it with one presentation. The property at issue is being shown here on your monitors. It is bifurcated between two sections. The top part is zoned CRC, Community Retail Commercial, within the Regional Activity Center and within a sub-area that would allow that. Originally, it was in a sub-area in the future land use map, the call for multifamily utilization. As you can see, if my clicker is going to work, a multiplicity of zonings surround this, which include, but are not limited to, multifamily. There's townhomes, there's apartments, there's condominiums. This is the present site plan that you'll be considering today. This is a site plan that has evolved I don't want to overuse the word, but when I say dramatically, I mean that, from 297,000 square feet, and David, and the three buildings that you're getting ready to see shown on your monitors. This was what was filed with the original applications. So you've got 4 separate buildings. You've got 297,000 square feet of space. You've got a total utilization of the site. And it was aggressive because from that, we've gone down to the site plan I was showing you previously to that is on the PowerPoint presentation. So from 297,000 square feet to 98,000 square feet, which is being shown in just a second. And the reason for that is threefold. Number one, even though it wasn't aggressive by regional activity center standards, it was aggressive because of the site itself. The topography of the site is incredibly steep. As one of our former PC chairmen said, it's billy goat country. And that explains why when this was zoned in 1994 and zoned for multifamily and heavy commercial utilization, which would include actually big box type of developments under the CRC component and 8-foot high apartments on the RMR part, the topography has limited every developer who's looked at this in the past quarter of a century, including the most recent one of Pulte Homes, one of our clients, that had planned for townhomes, and it just simply was not doable on the site for the reasons that I've just stated. We have approximately 6.45 acres, as you can see. This will be the architectural style and composition of the buildings. It's 3 stories with a basement, architectural treatment on all 4 sides. This is what the building will look like ultimately when not only it and its surroundings are landscaped with, these are Japanese cedars, but also as you go down the hill, I'm going to show you some profiles that show not only the distancing but the degree of topography levels and profiles exist. That's a Japanese maple tree, Japanese cedar tree when it's in 8 years in growth. So it's going to take 4 to 5 years to get these to that height. But if you've seen the property, and by the way, those are real, those trees, the big trees, that's not an artist's rendition. That was taken from a photograph, and those trees exist. But the interesting thing about this one is this is virtually a little mountain. What you're looking at, if you looked at the left hand of this exhibit, is a car coming out of the driveway of Cumberland Hills / Vinings Run, and you can see that it is located 240 feet from the actual footprint of the building going straight up a hill. Again, that big tree you see there is an existing tree. The others are representative of the Japanese cedars that will be planted there. The hill's not going away. The hill's got to be dressed up. When I say dressed up, I mean with Japanese cedar planting, subject to the arborist review and approval, and a committee that we'll set up with input from the CID, the staff, and area residents. But that's more than a football field from Vinings Run entrance, which, by the way, is offset purposely and over 400 feet away from the signalized intersection at Mount Wilkinson and Spring Hill Parkway. If you're pulling out of Vinings Run, unless you're in a convertible, you don't see anything. I mean, you would literally have to be able to look straight up to see anything. Of course, it's going to be landscaped with a beautiful building. We can skin these things, as in architectural appearance, just about any way you want to. This one is going to be stunning in terms of the way that it looks. The future land use map for this site is Regional Activity Center. This gives you a little bit of an overview. I'm mentioning Vinings Run and Cumberland Hills. If you look directly to the west across from the subject property, you can see the positioning of those condominiums / townhomes. They range, according to the tax assessor, in the range of $180,000 to about $230,000 in price points. This is the topo on the site. Again, the site is outlined in blue, but you can see the incredibly tight contours that shows you exactly why the building is where it is and how problematic the rest of the property would be to develop. Shows the properties in a regional activity center. Again, it's outlined there on your left right before you get to the multifamily. And these show the zonings that are around. Everything west of I-285 is multifamily, meaning apartments, condos, and towns. On the other side, meaning the eastern side of the interstate, you have mostly commercial and multifamily. Traffic has been a big issue, so if you could stop the clock for a minute while I ask Mr. Abdul Amir to come up here to address the traffic issues that he has looked at in terms of traffic movements, levels of service, and trip generation. This is Mr. Abdul Amir.
Good morning. For the record, Abdul Amir with A&R Engineering. I'm a traffic engineer. I've been asked to look into traffic for this project. Thank you. The orientation of the site, which proposes, it's northeast corner of Spring Hill Parkway and Mount Wilkinson Parkway. And we have two driveways that are proposed. The one on Spring Hill Parkway is a proposed full access driveway, and the one on Mount Wilkinson Parkway is a right in, right out driveway. There's a median there. I've met with Cobb DOT and discussed the access points, and I've been told that because of the low nature of the trip generation for this project, we're not required to conduct a full traffic impact study. However, my client has authorized me to go and conduct a full study, which I did, in order to address thoroughly all traffic issues and questions. What you're seeing in the slide is the low number of trips that project will generate. I think you can't find too many other land uses that can generate lower traffic than this land use for this size property. So as you can see in the table, in the AM peak hour, I guess this is what I would use. Okay. I'll just talk through it, no problem. At the bottom left corner of this slide, what you have is the AM peak hour and PM peak hour trips. As you can see, exiting the driveway on Spring Hill Parkway, in the morning rush hour, you will have a total of 5 cars. In the afternoon, total of 10 cars. Same thing, turning right. In the morning, 2 cars. In the afternoon, 4 cars. If you look on the bottom right graphic, you will see the number of cars entering and leaving in the peak hour are in the range of 3 to 4, 5, 6 cars. What that translates into simply is that there will be 1 car entering or leaving any of these driveways in every 10 minutes in the morning. And probably 5 to 6 minutes, there'll be 1 car entering and leaving. That's the magnitude of trip generation we're talking about. On the next slide, what I've documented is the level of service of the key intersections in the area. Spring Hill Parkway and Mount Wilkinson Parkway, which is a signalized intersection, currently the no-build column is basically without the traffic from our project. The no-build column shows that it's operating at level of service C in the AM and PM peak hour, which is pretty good. If you continue on the row after the project's traffic is added, the levels of service literally don't change. So the impact is insignificant. Same thing, the other intersection, we evaluated Spring Hill Parkway at Cumberland Court. It's unsignalized driveway, roadway, and the level of service again is B, C's, and A's, and those are not impacted by the proposed traffic when it's added. In the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the driveways that we are proposing. The full access driveway on Spring Hill Parkway, it has adequate side distance in both directions, and that will provide safe turning movements for traffic entering and leaving the site. A side distance profile has been included in the detailed traffic impact study that was submitted. A deceleration lane is proposed on Spring Hill Parkway going in the northbound direction, and Cobb County was comfortable with that. The driveway, the driveway will not align with Cumberland Court, so that will not impact any turning movements at the entrance to the subdivision there. I heard there were some concerns about downhill Spring Hill Parkway, northbound direction, and accidents from neighborhoods. So I've investigated the accident data for last year and found that there were 4 accidents that involved 2 vehicles. And all of them, I should say none of them, were involving any vehicles exiting Cumberland Court. They were all involved with northbound vehicles back rearing into somebody who stopped to turn left in it. And 3 to 4 accidents is something we see almost as an average, unfortunately, at most intersections. The side traffic at the driveway, which is not aligned with Cumberland Court, will not in any way impact the operations or the safety situation at Cumberland Court. The next and the last slide I have is about the right-in, right-out driveway on Mount Wilkinson Parkway. There is a median there, so there will be no left turns. And the right-in, right-out driveway is the least disruptive of any access you can provide to a property. The driveway is located approximately 280 feet from the stop bar where at the traffic light, and it's more than 300 feet from the center line of Spring Hill Parkway. I feel like that's adequate side distance, and the queuing from this traffic light extending on Mount Wilkinson Parkway in the morning rush hour is 150 feet or so. It does not extend up to the driveway. Throughout the day, it's less than 100 feet, doesn't extend up to the driveway. During the PM peak, when the signal is red and it's about to turn green, the maximum to which the queue extends is a little more than 280 oftentimes. It goes maximum up to 300. And so that time is so minimal, I estimate that to be 15 to 20% of the time in the PM peak hour, queues will extend past the driveway. Overall, if you look at the fact that there are only 6 cars exiting the driveway during the PM peak hour, and you have 70%, 80% of the time when the queues don't extend, and the fact that in the morning and throughout the day, the queues don't extend up to the driveway, I see no issue in terms of ability of these minimal number of cars to be able to exit on Mount Wilkinson Parkway safely, especially the fact that you can look to the left. The 2 lanes approaching this driveway on top of the bridge, the elevation of that road is so flat, you can look almost all the way down to the light there, Cumberland Parkway. So the fact that you have adequate side distance, and it's no different than any other driveway where you have to find the gap in opposing traffic. And then
Abdul, you really need to wrap it up. You've gone well beyond the 10 minutes, so we need to get to a conclusion here.
And I'll conclude with that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. We will need to cut off this portion and ask for the opposition to come on up. We went over a little over 5 minutes, so we'll give that added time to opposition if they need it. So come on up.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Terry, for your contributions to Cobb County and your service in the past. My name is Michael Robinson. I'm a longtime resident of Vinings Run and just returned to help out regarding this scenario. We as residents have been in the area since 1983. The community was built in 3 phases. So our concern relates to the nature of the long-term picture. We understand, based on the history of the area, since 2000 roughly, our neighboring communities essentially been able to keep residential single-family building developments in the area. So we're curious on how that thought process, if you will, if the project is approved, would change the nature of the environment within the community. I'll let my neighbors speak a little bit about some of the safety issues on the traffic aspect, because that's our biggest concern, but the big concern relates to going forward. Once this area would be zoned commercial, as is a storage facility, then that makes the rest of the area likely going down that road. Therein lies, that's the problem, because then the continual traffic areas continue to go forward. Secondly, in the last year, of course, with Battery Park, our road, main road, is now a main route for getting to Battery Park as an alternative to Cumberland Boulevard. So the traffic statistics are they're just getting started. That was information to me that 4 people have been in an accident. I wasn't aware of that in the prior years that we had any at all, actually, except for during snow issues. So I've covered the safety, the history, and the future, the 3 key areas that we really have a concern about. Just to comment on a little bit about the tax assessment, because that's also a big concern of many of our owners. particularly those who are on a fixed income, because we're growing towards the retiree base relative to the nature of our profile as a community. It's about 1/3 young professionals, 1/3 retirees, and then you've got empty nesters. The last 4 owners are all retirees. That's the other issue on the safety, regardless of the site issues, but going forward would be some of a concern for us. So that really, the 2 points I want to clarify, the tax assessment, we would love to be at 180 to 230. That's not our community based on our recent viewing. And in fact, the concern on the property values, when Cobb County made adjustments in 2012, I believe it was, they took our tax assessments essentially back to when the buildings were built back in the 1980s. So we've been doing a lot of work in our community, improved everything, and we've been able to increase the nature of the values in the community. But that, with the zoning reverting back to commercial, that would be a concern. So on that note, I'll turn it over to my associates, and they can basically make comments going forward. But those are 3 key issues.
Thank you, Michael. Next speaker, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kevin Jones. I live at 2206 Cumberland Court. I've been living there since 2000. With the massive amount of growth that has happened in our area, traffic is a safety issue. Our first thing that we had built was post-property apartment complex. Then Pulte Homes went in with the townhomes there. And High Point, the Providence Group is building there on Spring Hill Parkway as well. It is not completely sold out. They've got 18 homes left, and the reason I know is I work for Fidelity Bank, we're their preferred lender. Also, we have at the top of the subdivision that was at Paces Ferry and Cumberland Parkway, we have a community by Ashton Woods, the Park at Vinings, that's only 50% sold. Once these communities all build up, the road down the Spring Hill Parkway, which is a 2-lane narrow road, is really going to back up. I have videos that I've taken during rush hour traffic that actually backs up past Sutton Home Townhomes right there on Spring Hill Parkway, because you got that turn to turn left. If someone wants to turn left on Spring Road, you're stuck until those people get through that light. Unfortunately, I did not see any of the people that I invited from Sutton Homes. They knew about it, but nobody showed up today. They're concerned as well. Also, with this happening, with this going into place with the plans where they put the where they had the entrance out, that's north of us. Even though they have that turn lane there, somebody's going to come out there and try to turn left. And if you have not seen our road during rush hour traffic, people fly down that hill sometimes. I mean, really go fast, especially leaving from Home Depot. So that eventually one day is going to have a wreck. Coming out, coming out for the people leaving the complex on Mount Wilkinson, then you have to that's a turning lane that they're going to be turning out of. We're going to run into somebody, because we've all seen it, where someone's going to want to turn left and block the whole lane. I'm not moving until I get my way to turn left, and that's going to bring in more traffic. And another thing that's also going to be opening up too here pretty soon, I don't know what's going on with it, but the Passion City Church, that's going to be on Cumberland Parkway. Well, that's going to bring 500 members every Sunday plus. Again, what my colleague told me is that also the route to the Brave Stadium, SunTrust Park, and the Battery, people coming from Douglasville, ours is a known way as well that they say to come to the stadium. So other than that, if they build this thing too, if you guys do approve it, which I'm opposed, I would recommend the entrance be down further down the hill in between us and the Park at Vinings, because it'll be a little at the bottom of the hill where people could see somebody flying down the hill if they're going to turn left, or somebody coming to them turning right. But I definitely oppose this. I do think we're going to be overbuilt very soon for that 2-lane road. And with Pulte pulling out, they have bigger pockets than Mr. Linder, and there was a reason they pulled out. They had a geology test, and there's a lot of stones in there, so they'll probably be blasting some of that too. That's not, Pulte's a lot bigger than Tom Linder to build something of this size. And if they pulled out, there's a reason they pulled out. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please.
I'll be quick. My name is Bracken Fields, and I've been an owner of Vinings Run since the summer of 2001, so I'm going on 17 years. And I was just concerned with the fact of it being a storage unit, and the fact that, we are just, it is residential all down Spring Hill Parkway. And so I called some of the storage unit areas, places within a 3-mile radius. We have a public storage unit that is on the corner of Cumberland and Paces Ferry Road, right at the 285. And that's, they say right now it's 90% occupancy, but they say it does drop in the winter. That's 0.8 miles from where we live. It's 3 stories, I think, and with a basement. There's another one that's 1.25 miles away that's at 90% occupancy. There's another Universal Storage Group that's 86% occupancy. That's about 3 miles away. There's a couple more on South Cobb Drive. I did speak to a man that's 86% occupancy. Another one, Iron House Storage, is 80%. These are all within the 3.5 mile radius of where our neighborhood is. And none of them are completely full except for one, which is Tomahawk Moving. They referred me to A Alpha. And I called and spoke to the gentleman, and he said, well, I wish you luck tomorrow. He said, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they're currently in the process of building an extra space storage on the corner of 285 and South Cobb Drive that's under construction. There's another one that's built less than 2 years ago off of Oakdale Road and Highland Parkway. Apparently, there's a price war going on right now with rent on the places because the area has become so saturated with storage units. So, I just don't feel that there is a need for that right now. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Y'all can come and stand up front if you want to. That way you're not wasting any time because we're running out of time here quickly. Go ahead, please.
My name is Debbie Wilson. I've lived in Vinings Run for 22 years now. I'm retired. I'm not sure, in my opinion, it's a question of whether or not we need another storage facility, but the safety features and the traffic issue is a huge problem. I don't doubt the credentials of the traffic study. I would doubt the validity of the numbers, though. I think I would challenge the commission. I don't know how often you guys get to do field trips, but this is one location you really do need to see physically. An aerial, a schematic, a rendering will never give you a feel for the topography of this location. Our entrance and what goes up and down this road. Our entrance actually is at the bottoming out of 2 hills. And if my understanding is correct, the entrance to this storage facility is going to be almost directly across from ours. I'm a little disturbed that that the traffic engineer didn't tell you what all is on that road. He almost made it sound like Cumberland Court was the only street on that road. It's a pass-through from 41 to the East-West Connector and East-West Connector back to 41. Home Depot Home Depot corporate offices are on that road. There are single-family homes, there are apartments, there are townhomes. There's also an elementary school. Teasley Elementary School is on that road. There are school buses that stop at our entrance and let children off to come home into Vinings Run. So the traffic, the safety is an issue, plus the property values as well. Since I'm retired, I'm quite frankly concerned about those. So I am opposed to this, and I hope the board will give it serious consideration. And please, if you get the opportunity, go see this location, pull into Vinings Run and look at it physically. And if there's blasting involved, you've got 285 and a small 2-lane road, Spring Hill Parkway. Not sure I would be comfortable with a school bus pulling up with children getting off and blasting being done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Heidi Hansen. I also live at Vinings Run. Debbie really did capture on the one thing was about the school buses. There's another part. From Mount Wilkinson to the entrance of Vinings Run, going down the hill, there is a sidewalk. From there, there's not another sidewalk. Maybe up past Post Vinings, there's a little bit of a sidewalk, but people walk up and down this 2-lane road. which is dangerous enough as it is. In fact, there's one gentleman I see just about every day walking with his cane. He gets out and walks every day, but there are no sidewalks really down this road, which is kind of dangerous. Also, at the bottom of the hill, quite often if we have heavy rains, that turns into a lake. There is a lake at Post Vinings, and it floods over across the road when it's really heavy. Somebody might want to say when you pull out of the driveway, you're not looking up. Well, if you don't look up, you're in trouble. You better look up, you better look to the left, and you better look to the right, and you better hope you can get out of there in 5 minutes. Because the cars coming down, when you're coming down Spring Hill Parkway to the Mount Wilkinson, the speed limit is 45. When you cross this intersection, it is 30. Nobody goes 30 on that road. In fact, the other day, I was coming up the hill to turn right into the entrance. I was going probably 35. This man behind me didn't like it. He comes whipping around me where there's another car coming towards us, but he made it in time. But we definitely don't need any more traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Kelly Brown, and I too am a resident at Vinings Run. We moved there in 2015, so we haven't got 17 or 22 years underneath our belt, but we did find that residential area to be a great place to start a family. For us, and being a younger couple, we believe that the increased traffic that would come from the storage facility would not be something that we would feel to be a safe environment in doing so. I'm an avid runner, and many of my neighbors will tell you that, and I often run in that area, and I'm already not safe with the minimal sidewalks that we have. In addition to that, like she said, there are very few people who come through that area going at or beneath the speed limit, and many people double and triple that. For days like Braves or rush hour, I'm almost sad to say that most people are speeding through those areas and have little regard for the speed limit. On top of that, I'm almost a little disgusted that the traffic engineer stated that there were only 6 people coming in and out because any given day, each of us are running into one another in our own neighborhood trying to get out of that. On top of that, like aforementioned, there are many Home Depot workers who are trying to get to work, and that road on its own backs up because of that, so much that they have a security crossing guard at their entrance each morning and each evening just to handle their own traffic. In addition to this being an eyesore sitting at the corner of what is a complete residential area, I do not believe that the storage facility should be approved at this time.
Okay, thank you. We're almost out of time. Y'all need to hurry. Come on up.
Just real quick, you had that one kid with the car at the bottom of the hill.
Okay, give us your name. Give us your name, please.
My name's Mike McKenna. I've been an owner in Vinings Run for about 3.5 years. I haven't talked about property value too much. I just decided to put my place up for sale in the next 3 weeks. I was planning on moving next spring, but I'm afraid that it will kill my property value. But what's deceptive here, the reason why they had a traffic expert come in, is our entrance is in the middle of this very steep grade of a hill. So to get up that hill, when you turn out of our community, it's extremely, you have to hit the gas to get up to the top of the hill, and that's about 100 yards up. You can't see that there's a street light there. And when cars make that green light to come down the hill, they come flying. They're already going 40, 50 miles an hour, and they're on our entrance in a matter of seconds. To the left, coming up the hill, which is about 120 yards at the bottom of the hill, you can't see cars until they're at the bottom of the hill. So you literally have a couple of seconds to make a decision whether to go left or right. As soon as you see that it's clear to the right, nobody's come flying over the hill, you turn left, somebody could be shooting up the hill, and you got a couple seconds. Speed limit's 30. People go minimum 40, 45. Some people 50, 65.
Mike, we're out of time. And do you folks have anything new that we haven't heard?
Just the last little thing is since the park opened, traffic has quadrupled.
Okay, thank you. Anything we haven't heard? Yes. Okay, come on up really quickly now.
Reverend Mother Vicki McDermott, 34-year residence. Please remember the essential nature of where we live. We're close-knit, we're loving, we're family, we're residential.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker.
Yes, I have one concern because I do have a storage
Give
facility.
us your name.
Oh, Marilyn Paulson.
Okay,
I'm a
Marilyn.
28-year resident of Vining Run condominium. I know they were talking about the lack of sidewalks. I rent a storage facility on Herodian Way, and after the Brave Stadium, they charge for parking. So I have a concern that they're gonna put parking slots for people to park for the Braves game, and then we'll have all those people walking up Spring Hill Road without sidewalks, people speeding, and additional dangers.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are out of time, so we'll need to close this portion of the hearing. I get the brass ring on this one as well. This is also in District 2, and it's another climate-controlled self-storage building. So let's talk about this a little bit. Number one, I did get quite a few emails mainly from the folks in Vinings Run. I appreciate it very much. I responded to a few of them. Can't possibly respond to all of them, but I read every single one. We all do. We read them, so thank you for that. We do visit every site. I live in the area, and I've been to this site 3 times. I've been all over your community of Vinings Run. I have friends that live there today, a couple of them sitting in the audience today, in fact, that I noticed. I've been in that community many times. I know exactly what the lay of the land is, and I've walked this site. So I do know what it looks like, and it is a very challenging site. So I just want to say that. I find that in almost every single email that I received, that much of what was being presented as concerns and complaints was based on incorrect, let's call it, or even obsolete information. There was a new site plan filed not too long ago, which I don't think most of you have even seen. It does change things. We saw it this morning when Mr. Sams presented it to you, but we've seen that. We've all had that for some time. You could have accessed it by going back on the county website, but I believe that a lot of what you were complaining about and concerned about was really based on obsolete information. I'm not going to run through the whole list. I've cataloged about 20 individual concerns that were expressed to me, but some of these do need to be addressed, I think. The issue of whether, and these are not in any particular order, they're in the order that I received them, that it's not needed. I take exception to that. One person even said that when they called around, they found that most of the climate-controlled self-storage, all the self-storage buildings in the area were at least 90% occupied. I found a couple that were 100% occupied that are very close by. That changes. As people move into and out of the community, it can go from 85 to full very, very quickly. Is it needed? You all mentioned how fast the growth has been in our area over the last few years. Lots of residential, single-family detached homes, apartments, condos. It's all been built up. Even before the Braves came and Battery Park came, we have a lot of need for this type of business. So is there a need? Yeah, I think there really is. In fact, I know there is. One person called this an eyesore. That lady sent me an email. 2 of you sent me an email and said this is an eyesore. I want to be sure we understand. This is not your typical orange roll-up door self-storage business. This is a climate-controlled, and that's important, self-storage business designed and built by an award-winning builder. Now, I'm not defending him, but I have seen his work, and I will tell you that we could do far worse. If this does get built, if the BOC approves it, it will be a very high-end business, very high-end. So I'm not too concerned about it being an eyesore. One person told me that this clearly would attract transients, which would increase crime. Now, I didn't hear too much, I didn't hear anything mentioned about that this morning, but a lot of you put that in an email. This kind of business does not attract transients. This is not an orange roll-up business storage facility. It's not. It's very safe. It's very secure. Transients don't go here. There's no reason for them to go there. They can't get in. So that's not going to happen. I don't think it will increase crime. In fact, whenever we've approved these in the past, it not only has not increased crime, crime has gone down. So that's, I think, a fact. The traffic congestion issue, everyone mentioned. Every one of you that stood up here mentioned that, plus every single email that I got, which was probably 30 or 40 emails mentioned traffic. We heard Abdul, our traffic engineer, the traffic engineer hired by the applicant, give the facts and figures. I believe them. I believe them because we have done this so many times in Cobb County. I don't even know how many of these facilities we've approved around Cobb County. They just don't generate the traffic of anything else that could go there. If you were to put a high-rise office, a low-rise office, a retail shopping facility, single-family detached homes, apartments, condos, you name it, you put any of that there, you're going to have many, many times the traffic congestion problems than you would have with this type of facility. So saying that it's going to increase traffic congestion just is not borne out by the facts. So I have to say that for sure. Why can't we just wait on single-family detached homes to come here? We heard Pulte Homes mentioned. They decided to pull out, and they decided to pull out for a lot of reasons. This is an extremely challenging site. The topography, which Mr. Sam showed us, it's tough. It's tough terrain. It's hilly, it's rocky, it's narrow down on the far end. It's going to be challenging for anybody to build here, but single-family homes are not going to come here. It's just not the type of site that will attract that kind of development. So I don't think we can say that we should just wait on that. Someone said the view from our Vinings Run entry will be ruined. It'll be awful. There's a hill. When you come up out of your subdivision and you're looking at this site across the street, there's a hill there now. My calculation is that it rises from the street about 25 to 30 feet. Now, it may be taller than that, depending on where you're looking, but that's what I think. I made sure to negotiate with Mr. Linder and with Mr. Sams that hill stays intact. Not only that, it needs to be planted, which Garvis did show us a minute ago. It needs to be planted and enhanced with some evergreen trees so that when you come up out of Vinings Run, you are screened. And you're not going to be looking at a big behemoth of a building sitting there. You're just not. You might see the top of the building. I doubt that you'll even see that. So that hill is not going to go away, which several people expressed a concern to me. Property values will plummet. I had one lady that said, I have a friend that's a real estate agent, and she promised me my property values are going to plummet. Wherever we have approved these, we have seen just the opposite occur. There's really no evidence that any of you could present that can convince me that your property values are going to plummet. I just don't think that that will happen. We hope it won't happen, but I've never seen evidence that shows that it does when this kind of business comes into the community. So I don't think we have to worry too much about that. And then there were lots of other situations that were brought to our attention that really don't deserve a lot of thought. It doesn't fit the comp plan. It does. There's a creek on the site. There's not. The detention pond will attract mosquitoes. It's not a retention pond. There's no water going to be standing there. So none of that really holds true. Those were most of the things that I heard in emails, which I do think were based on obsolete and old information that frankly you hadn't been given yet. Now, one other thing. I did ask Mr. Sams weeks ago to have a community meeting. I asked Mr. Linder to have a community meeting where he could present this to all of you and could answer your questions one-on-one. That hasn't happened yet, but I was assured in a phone call from him yesterday that that will happen. So don't be disheartened in that. There were things that didn't come together quite quickly enough for him to present the full picture to you. I do know that for a fact, part of which was Abdul's plan, traffic plan, and traffic study. Those things are very detailed. They do take some time to put together. So sometime between now and the BOC hearing, which is in 2 weeks, you're going to have a community meeting, and I would encourage you to go to that and listen to what Mr. Sams and Mr. Linder has to say. They can answer some of the other questions that you may have, so I'm not too concerned about that. I think that will happen. I have some questions for Mr. Sams. Garvis, you want to come back up, please? Abdul, you might want to join him because some of this is going to be related to you. I mentioned the hill. I'm just going to call it the hill that you're looking at when you come up out of Vinings Run. Can you give us an assurance that you're going to save that and enhance it with plantings? What are we going to do with that hill?
Yes, sir. And you saw an example of the Japanese cedar trees. It seems like it runs through stages from Leland cypress to cryptomeria to Borovite. But the Japanese cedar tree grows so rapidly, it keeps its understory. It doesn't lose it as it grows out of it. So the entirety of the property that surrounds the facility would be planted with that. To the extent that it goes downhill from that, then The trees that are there will be enhanced with additional plantings of Japanese cedar trees as well. They're evergreens, and when I say evergreen, they are beautiful trees, as you saw.
Okay.
So that assurance is there. Is that included with any degree of specificity in the stipulation letter? No, but I'm saying as a matter of public record now, and we will revise the stipulation letter accordingly.
Of course, I can add it too, you know.
Well, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, let's talk about the entry on the main, well, it's not the main entry, but the secondary entry on Mount Wilkinson. DOT and I have been talking back and forth about this, and they have indicated that that entry does not need to be right in, right out. They have a safety concern and an issue. Abdul, you said you weren't too concerned about that. My concern is the same one that DOT has expressed to me and to you. If you come out of that entry and you're heading up toward the major intersection, but you need to go in the opposite direction, you have to do a U-turn. You're crossing 3 lanes of traffic to get to that point, to do the U-turn. That's why they recommended that we not allow right in, right out, but we allow entry only, but not an exit from there. So what would you say about the U-turn situation? And U-turns are allowed, by the way, at that intersection.
He's going to be the definitive answer, but let me just say one thing. The decisions made with respect to the traffic generation and traffic movements are really made by the operations division of DOT, and they've not looked at this. We understand the preference of Ms. White and Ms. Diaz, but right now we show right in and right out. And if you look at this photograph that you're seeing, Mount Wilkinson is to the south of the property, and you go right in and you can come right out. You cross 1 lane only because there are 2 dedicated and protected left turning lanes that get you to the signalized intersection, and there's sufficient distancing there. As far as U-turn maneuvers, I will let Mr. Mayor talk about that, and also the queuing.
It looks to me like you're crossing at least 3 lanes to get into the lane to make a U-turn. So Abdul, what do you say about that?
The right out movement, the key thing to evaluate for a traffic engineer here is when can a right turner enter the road from that right in, right out driveway. I think they can enter the road when there is a gap that they can acknowledge is safe enough, big enough between oncoming traffic on top of the bridge. There are 2 lanes on the bridge. They have to look at those 2 lanes. And if these 6 cars in an hour, 1 in 10 minutes, if they can find a gap in these 2 vehicles, it doesn't matter once they turn right, whether they're turning right on Spring Hill Parkway, they're going straight through the signal or making a left turn or a U-turn. The key thing is, can they look to the left and see far enough and identify a safe gap for them to turn right? When they find the gap in the 2 lanes, it doesn't matter which lane they're turning into.
So the sight distance in both directions from that entry or exit, you're saying is adequate to be a safe right out?
That is correct.
Okay. We'll have to get DOT to come up here and comment on that because we've had a lot of discussion on that. Garvis, let me ask you, confirm the building height to me. I know we're now down to 1 building. Is it 2 over a basement or 3 over a basement?
It is 3 over a basement.
Okay, so 3 over a basement. The basement not really visible from where? Not visible from Spring Hill?
Not from Spring Hill nor Mount Wilkinson, be visible from I-285 in the southern part of the
Okay, so really 3 stories above grade is what we're,
yes,
from
sir.
a visibility standpoint.
And you'll remember, and from the construction of climate control self-service storage facilities, the floors are compacted. They're 10 feet between floors.
And what is that distance from grade to where we measure? Is it
32 feet.
So you're going to be 32 feet above grade?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I got you. All right. Are there any other variances, any variances that are being requested with this?
No, sir.
So no variances?
And just for your edification and those in the audience, the first site plan you see with all the buildings on there, there may ultimately be additional buildings, but it's positioned so that the entirety of that process would have to come back for public hearing, public input. So we hope that the market is just astounding and justifies that. I do want to say one thing. Right now, the property, 4/5 of the property is zone CRC within a regional activity center. So there is no restriction. I look back at the minutes from 1994. There are no restrictions on the utilization of that from a commercial perspective. And as you know, CRC is the third least restrictive classification in the ordinance. Are there problems? Yeah, you'd have to move about 30,000 cubic yards of dirt at about $500,000 just to get the site down. So I can promise you, it's doubtful that it would be developed under those. But we're not going to a commercial. It is commercial.
Do you
now.
think the site is rocky enough that blasting might be required? Mr. Linder may be the one to answer this. What do you think?
Mr. Linder has, it's called due diligence. There are environmental tests, there are geologic tests, and there's subterranean geologic tests. There's hydrological testing. He spent an inordinate amount of money to get to this point. I can't speak for Pulte simply because we represent them and their attorney-client matters that have to remain confidential. But I can tell you that Mr. Linder has been the only one in the past quarter of a century that's been able to overcome, work around those obstacles, and has sufficient resources in order to overcome them in perpetuity.
Without blasting?
The blasting is something that's controlled by the federal and state government, and he's done borings on the site to ensure that he'll be able to have the correct foundations. That's really when you get into more distinct and site-specific engineering, that decision has been made. But the law is very clear about what is required, and blasting is not blasting like we think of it as blasting that is confined to the point where the blast occurs. I can't answer that question definitively, and I don't think Mr. Linder knows that either.
And there are regulations that about how you announce this, how you have to tell people within a certain distance.
There are laws
and certain hours that it can be done or not done. So if that occurs, protections will be in place. Someone talked about sidewalks. DOT has recommended sidewalks on all sides of this.
We're installing sidewalk, curb, and gutter on all of our frontages, yes, sir.
And now the one issue that I really want the Planning Commission to weigh in on, and I want to hear your explanation. There's one part of your stipulation that just very briefly mentions the possibility of and the likelihood of a small retail component inside this building. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, you've seen the photographs of the interior of the Dunwoody that won the national recognition. There's an office component to it, but also what made Dunwoody so successful was in terms of an ancillary. An ancillary suggests related of an innocuous retail component, and that's dedicated to 9,700 square feet on the first floor, which are individual beauty salons, not a beauty parlor, but 200 to 300 square foot spaces that are leased to individuals by appointment only, hairdressers, hairstylists, whatever they call them. But it's really been successful in Dunwoody, and it's a definitive use, that only, not retail per se, and by appointment only. And Mr. Mayor has taken into consideration the IT traffic generation charge with respect to that, and also, and I heard someone say they were disgusted with his results. His results are based on facts and data and the collection of traffic.
I don't question the results. I did notice in the traffic report that there was trip generation generated for just the warehouse built, the facility, the storage facility, and also for the salon. And I was curious about that because it's as many or more trips per day generated by a hair salon as there would be by the self-storage business too. So that,
yes, sir.
That was curious. That one issue generated a lot of discussion at our work session. I'm curious today, what do you guys, I really wish you'd weigh in on this. What do you think of, I don't know that Cobb County, Judy, you may know, or John, you may know, have we ever approved this type of retail business inside a self-storage business?
No.
John, have we? Judy, have we?
No, we have not.
What's your opinion about that?
My opinion is that the storage facility, the climate control facility is a good use for this property, but given that it's already zone CRC and R. But the retail portion, bothers me because what in essence it would turn out to be, to me, would be a retail center. If you put commercial into your self-storage, then all it is a retail center. It's not really a self-storage per se. It's a retail center. So I do have problems. Don't have problems with the self-storage. I do believe the traffic counts are low. I believe that there is probably a use for it. I believe it's already zoned, so, but the retail is what bothers me, that it could be a generator of more cars than what we think. So I don't want to gut an ordinance that we spend a lot of time getting, where it is today, where you have to have the special land use permit, self-storage, and they are becoming popular. So I think if it caught on, then we'd have to go back and look at that self-storage again to see, is it really a self-storage or is it a retail center?
Anybody else?
Yes.
Yep.
I guess I'm really concerned about the traffic. I'm not concerned about the amount of traffic, and I read through the traffic report, the study. But when I look at the hair salon and the mini warehouse, half of the traffic that's being generated roughly is from the hair salon. I mean, so in other words, it could be half that without the hair salon. What I'm most concerned about is the two entrances and exits. And I hear, Garbus, that you say that the applicant wants to, hold in abeyance the decision to maybe have additional buildings on the balance of that property. But I'm just wondering about the wisdom of having the entrance exit on Spring Hill Parkway as close to the intersection as it is right now, with the possibility being that it could be way down the hill, as some of the residents who live around there are suggesting. And particularly if there are going to be additional buildings down there, possibly in the future, you would want to have an entrance exit down there anyway. In fact, the earlier design, in fact, showed one down there. So I'm just wondering about the wisdom of having, I understand there's a long deceleration lane coming down the hill, and I've been out there and I've looked at it, but I'm just wondering about the wisdom of having that entrance exit on Spring Hill Parkway as close to the intersection as it is on that slope, on that grade, versus way down the hill at the bottom of the hill. And then with respect to the entrance exit on Mount Wilkinson Parkway, it just seems to me that with the low level of traffic, I can see that it makes sense to have a right in, but to have the right out right there, why not just get rid of that and just have it be at the Mount Wilkinson, at the Spring Hill entrance exit instead? Just make it a right in only off of Mount Wilkinson and just be done with it.
Yeah, I want Garvis to answer, but I want to give one point. If you do that, Skip, if you move it down the hill, you lose that landscaped hill that frankly I worked pretty hard to get, and I think is very important to act as a screen from the Vinings Run subdivision, number one. And number two, if you move it farther down the hill, you'll be forced to align it with the entry into Vinings Run.
Way past that.
Well,
I might shed some light on that. I understand, Commissioner Gunther, where you're going. This is the original plan, the 297,000 square foot plan with buildings here. And what you've got here is, this is what we start at, 2 points of ingress and egress, full-blown ingress and egress on Spring Hill. We ran into a situation, number one, there is 140 feet of fall on this property from this point down to here. So in order to keep from having to circumnavigate this building with just a right-in only and buck the fall to come back up to this was problematic without an out or right out here. We moved this down at DOT's operational suggestions down where it's closer to this, but offset. They wanted offset. We're still 440 feet away from this signalized intersection. If we move a site down here, point of ingress and egress, it only serves this site down there topographically. I mean, it just can't serve this site up here. So if this gets developed, then you'll likely have an additional point of ingress and egress. But this is where, which is here now, it showed there at first, this is where DOT wanted it offset, not aligned with this. But where it is now is 440 feet away here, and we have almost 300, Jill, help me, how many feet do we have from this right end right out here to the crossbar here?
280.
And 280 feet, your minimum is 280 feet. One thing I don't think I've been able to convey effectively, and that is the, right out here, there is a lane here. All you've got to do is go over one lane, and then there's two dedicated turning lanes. You don't have to get over to the far lane, but there's two dedicated turning lanes for this, if you wanted to go in an a westerly direction.
If you're doing a U-turn though, Garvis, you have to get in that farthest lane. That means you have to cross two lanes.
Yeah,
If you're doing a U-turn, and that was my concern, was the U-turn traffic.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative, Mr. Chairman, but I drove it after you and I talked yesterday. I went yesterday evening and drove this. Both of these lanes right here, these are dedicated protective turning lanes, and both of them you can do U-turns with, both of them. The width is there. I've got an SUV. I don't know how long it is, but it's long. Terrible turning radius. But I was in the outer lane, and I made this into a dedicated lane for turning. Then there's sufficient radii to do that with.
So you addressed my questions about entrances and exits. But going back to the original question that the chairman has asked, what do we think about that hair salon being in there? I'm all about traffic, and I'm very sensitive to, everybody keeps talking about traffic in virtually every one of our rezoning applications. Anything we can do to reduce traffic, I think, should be top priority. I'm very happy with the idea that as a self-storage facility, we're generating about the lowest level of traffic you can imagine for any development that might go on this property. But you're doubling it by adding that hair salon. And that's just a small amount of real estate in the overall context of the size of the building. But you're doubling the traffic, round numbers, you're doubling it from the traffic generation statistics. I would, probably be happier if we didn't have a hair salon in there.
And I wouldn't even be suggesting it if it hadn't been a part of an incredibly successful business model. And I don't want to harp on awards and things of that nature, and it's one jurisdiction compared to the other, but putting them both together, whether one exceed the other, we're significantly below the traffic that would be generated with a CRC and an RMR, number one. Number two, the levels of service are not only appreciably, or not appreciably changed, they remain the same or get better, particularly in juxtaposition to utilization of the site as an RMR and a CRC. I understand your concerns, but we think those concerns are ameliorated by balancing the two uses. And remember, this is appointment only. This is not a site you drive by and say, hey, I think I'm going to stop there. Or if you're, I don't want to sound chauvinistic, but women like to have their hair done regularly.
Be careful.
I am, but it's a business that is a modicum, or is a model business in terms of its generation. It's all appointments. So we see this as a destination, not as well, I'll get in trouble with my wife if I keep going.
Ms.
So
Powell, are you looking for a hairdresser by any chance?
I am not looking for a
Okay, well,
hairdresser.
tell us what you think.
Certainly not driving all the way down there. With respect to the hair salon, I think all we have to do is look at the code, which under the category for self-storage, that any business that needs an occupational license, which a hairdresser would, is not allowed. There shall be no retail sales or commercial activities. And, it talks about flammable liquids and hazardous liquids. There might be some of those. But I think the code is very clear, and I think that would require a variance, and setting a precedent of that magnitude is not what I'm interested in at this juncture. Shall I go on or just
Sure.
comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go.
One of my biggest concerns is that the first plan that was submitted was for 3 buildings. So obviously, there was some indication that that was something that you would want to develop. Then it went down to 2, and then it went down to 1. So part of it is the strategy to say, well, this could have been 290,000 square feet, and now it's only 98,000 square feet. Because there are conflicting comments being made about it being able to be developed versus not being able to be developed. In your STIP letter, you talk about potential development coming back under other business. I am not going to support zoning a piece of property when I have no idea what could come forward on that without a full-blown zoning hearing. And I realize OB items do have public input. The other thing you have in your STIP letter is reference to the billboard, that's not part of the zoning, so it needs to be out of your STIP letter and off of your site plan, if this is the site plan that's going to be approved.
May I respond?
Pardon?
May I respond?
Yes.
Okay. The billboard site, in our discussions with the Georgia Department of Transportation, of course, it's a different process, but they have requested, and your DOT has requested that we interface and coordinate with them. So that was shown for their purposes in order to be transparent with respect to the ultimate plans for that. It wasn't to infer. In fact, it expressly says it doesn't infer that we know we're going to have a billboard or are allowed one, or that it's even within the county's province to grant that. So that's there in accordance with DOT's recommendation that we interface with GDOT. As far as the discussion about how this plan has evolved, it's evolved, as I've mentioned, not as a bait and switch, quite the opposite. It's a switch for certain, but it's an evolution of the process as a result of our continued discussions with staff, the input we've received from particularly DOT and GDOT, input we've received from the Cumberland CID, since this is within a regional activity center, and also discussions that we've had with some area residents as well. So it is simply an evolution, and we're making no secret of the fact that if this is successful, then we come back. If you wanted full-blown hearing, other business, we don't really have a preference. We wanted to make certain that everyone understood it would take a full hearing process. And I have full belief that Mr. Linder intends, if this is successful, or when it's successful, to come back and develop the site. And we now have a template as to how that would work. Maybe it's the 3 buildings, maybe it's the 2. But the fact of the matter is, you have what you have before you today is an evolution in response to concerns that have been articulated.
And my final question relates to the number of units. There's nothing in any of the documentation that indicates the number of units in this facility.
That's fluid.
Pardon?
It's fluid and market-driven.
Okay.
I have floor plans, Commissioner Powell. Be glad to share with you, but it's a fluid situation. It'll have units that will range from wine storage to office storage to furniture storage. Everyone needs either a certain size, a certain spec. So it'll be built out according to how the market dictates that on the inside.
Okay, so under the SLUP comments, it talks about 27 parking spaces. And if we do 27 times 80, that's 2,160 units?
You'll have to ask staff that. We meet the parking ratio requirements. I've done time-lapse photography 7 years ago on a site in Vinings that was an existing climate-controlled self-service storage facility from Friday at 6 p.m. until Monday morning at 6 a.m. There were 12 cars that were generated during that period of time. There is no lesser traffic generator, except perhaps a mausoleum and a cemetery, than climate-controlled self-service storage facilities.
Well, 2,160 units for 27 parking spaces. So I'm just referring back to the information that we have and the fact that there's nothing in any of your documentation that addresses units.
Staff is conversant with it, and they have the documentation you may need.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Porter?
I'll jump in. With regard to the retail component, I recognize that 80% of this property is already zoned CRC. So they could, but for the terrain, probably would have already been developed. A shopping center, a gas station, all of those uses would be allowed to go in now. Lots of other things, offices and hotels and all kinds of uses that would generate more traffic. But they probably, even though I do agree, looking at this Dunwoody building, that this developer has one of the most attractive self-storage units I've seen, some of those other uses may be more attractive. It wouldn't be as big of a building and things like that. So there's a trade-off of doing that. You know, the traffic's obviously an issue, mainly because of the Braves Stadium coming and that. So I'm a little torn on whether you allow a very limited amount of retail or not, because I've seen it in other areas work. I actually used to have a office warehouse that the front was office warehouse kind of buildings, but behind it was all self-storage. And it worked well. And for me, it worked well because I was able to expand my storage by just adding storage units at the back when needed for peak times and that. So I've seen some with retail in them and that. It can work. I don't know that this is the ideal location for it. So that's where I'm a little torn on that piece. I definitely have a concern about the right out on Mount Wilkinson for the simple reason that a lot of this traffic is going to be truck traffic. And I don't want somebody pulling out in a truck, blocking 3 lanes of traffic because they want to get to the left turn lane. And they just kind of pull out and do that. And we know people do things like that. And one of the neighbors mentioned that concern. So to me, I don't think it's a good location to have a right out, right in. I don't see any issue with. You know, and I know I guess for the neighbors, I know you probably prefer this property just to be undeveloped forever. And, you know, we see that and hear that all the time, but the reality is people do have property rights. And it probably won't be long if this use doesn't go in before some other retail or commercial use that the property's already zoned for, that they don't have to come before us, will go on that property, because property in this area has been selling, and we've had lots of zoning cases, and they're tearing down buildings now. So the fact to level a site, even though it's an expensive site to level, it's getting to the point that that's cost effective. It may not have been for the last 30 years cost effective, but I think it's getting there. So self-storage is, and we know all the statistics that have gone through, one of the least intense uses of the property. It's typically in the past not been a real attractive use, and that's getting better with each of these we do. And certainly I see a big difference between what's being proposed here and the application we heard an hour ago of what was being proposed there. So that, you know, it's kind of
an hour ago.
Oh, well,
let's wrap it up,
however,
folks.
However long ago we heard that one, because that to me was a whole different scenario and way it was being brought about. So I think in the end, given that this is already a commercial piece of property, or at least 80% of it, and others, you know, could have high density residential in, which would generate a whole lot more traffic, I think you might actually be happy with this versus versus another use. You may not realize it, but if you sit here for the years we've done this and seen what other potential can come, this is probably a dream, you just don't know it, to get this use.
We'll have the officer walk you to your car when you leave. Thank you, Gall. Okay, let's move on. I do want to do one other thing I promised earlier. Garvish, if you don't mind stepping back, I want to get DOT up here. We're gonna let them comment on a couple of these entry and exit issues.
As she approaching, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Robertson, the first individual that spoke, we've kept him in the loop and copied on all these changes, and we will have a community meeting now that I know who they are.
Good, thank you so much.
Amy Diaz, DOT.
Ashley White, DOT.
Okay, let's talk about, I guess, first things first, the right-in, right-out proposal by the applicant on Mount Wilkinson. What does DOT think about that from a safety standpoint? Either one or both of you. I've talked to both of you on it, so.
We also don't see any difficulty with the right-in, but we at this time don't support the right-out. We understand that the trip generation is relatively low, but we see the safety issue with right-out vehicles trying to cross those lanes of traffic at the traffic signal to even turning left, but certainly the U-turn traffic. One thing that I wanted to point out in the traffic study is during the PM peak hour, there are 592 vehicles turning left at that intersection during the peak hour. So that's a lot of traffic that they're trying to merge into if they want to turn left or U-turn. So what I did is I haven't had a chance to talk to traffic operations yet, which is what Garvis referenced earlier, but I have taken the analysis file and looked at the simulation, and there are not gaps during that time period. So where I recognize it's a relatively low volume of traffic during one time a day, it's still a safety issue during that time.
Okay. How about the other, they're calling it the main entrance down on Spring Hill Parkway? Any issues with that location, width? We have a decel lane there. Is it long enough? Is the sight distance adequate, left and right? What's your opinion on that?
Their traffic study shows that they meet the requirement of 335 feet each direction, but that's something that we verify in plan review. They have to submit a sight distance profile, and as long as they meet that sight distance requirement, we have no issue with where it's located now.
Would there be any benefit, as Skip alluded to earlier, to moving it farther down the hill? Would that make it any safer, any better? Yes, no, maybe?
It can make it safer in that if you're not trying to decelerate at the same time you're trying to turn, but it can cause a sight distance difference depending on the vertical curve as you're trying to turn out. It basically changes the sight profile, so it really depends on the sight conditions. As far as whether or not you can make it at the same location as the existing across the street subdivision or at where it's at now, there's an offset distance we require. So we usually don't have a preference as long as the sight distance is met, whether or not it lines up with a driveway or it's at that offset distance. We just don't want it in between there. So it can either be offset or lined up.
So the offset was really by design?
Yes.
And at DOT's request? Is that?
Well, or lined up. But it can't be, say 70 feet offset. It has to be the minimum offset. Okay. So it can, if as long as the sight distance is met, it could have been lined up.
Yeah, we have no preference as long as sight distance is met.
Okay, so where it is now, sight distance shouldn't be an issue, and with a decel lane added, hopefully it will be fine, right?
From what I could tell, that was submitted with the traffic study.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Since you ladies are up there and Mr. Sams threw the billboard into your court, what information can you provide about the billboard?
As I understand, well, we did ask them to interface with GDOT because there are future plans for 285. I assume you're talking about a billboard that faces 285.
We're not.
I'm not
we didn't get
otherwise
any information about it.
I'm not otherwise familiar with the billboard situation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say on billboards,
Yeah, I was
John?
fixing to ask John. John, DOT, our DOT is not really in control of that.
I think Mr. Shams meant GDOT because they have to approve billboards that are on the side of interstate highways. As far as our code goes, it does not allow new billboards unless you have a 3-to-1 takedown for the number of faces. So they would have to demonstrate that to us that they've taken down 3 or 6 faces to put this one up.
Okay, I got you. Okay, why don't we we're gonna try to wrap this up. We have been at this for quite a while, okay? All right, I think we've heard everything we need to hear, and I think I've drawn a conclusion here. I'm gonna recommend approval of Z16, subject to all staff comments and recommendations, subject to the stipulation letter from Mr. Sams dated March 13th, the revised site plan attached and the renderings attached, and subject to a few changes to the stipulation letter. I want to start with stipulation number 3 in Mr. Sam's letter. I would like that to read, the rezoning of the subject property shall be from CRC and RMR to RRC, which is Regional Retail Commercial, for the development of, and this is a long an acronym, CCSSSF, which is Climate Control Self-Storage Facility, only. Put that word in there, development of a self-storage business only, which shall be in substantial conformity to the revised site plan, which was submitted with this stipulation letter. So that means that the retail component, which we all agreed is questionable at best, would not be allowed at this time. Stipulation number 9, which has to do with that access point on Mount Wilkinson, I need that number A under number 9 to read, write-in access only from Mount Wilkinson Parkway per Cobb DOT recommendations. Now, again, all these things can be taken up with the BOC when they hear the case, but this would be my recommendation. Stipulation number 10, I would add as a third paragraph. There are 2 in stipulation 10. The third paragraph, which is new, should read, the existing hill found on the site and located opposite the Vinings Run main entrance on Spring Hill Parkway shall remain intact for a depth not less than 50 feet as measured from the back of the curb and continuing east. That's how far in they're going to go. And said hill shall be enhanced and planted with evergreen trees as approved and spaced by the county arborist. Trees will have a minimum installed height of 6 feet. They'll probably be taller than that. That's an attempt to save that hill, enhance it with plantings, so it acts as a very good screen and a buffer to that community. I want to, let's see here. I want to change number 13. I believe, let me look at it. Yeah, Ms. Powell, Theo mentioned the other buildings that may at some point come back. If they do, this applicant does come back to add another building or so to the other end of the site, I think that's problematic as well. I want to ask John and Debbie to listen as I read this and see if this sounds like it will work. For number 13, I would like it to read, potential additional development on the subject property shall be subject to review and approval by the entire Board of Commissioners by way of a full zoning hearing. In other words, not an other business item. Does that make sense, like I've worded it? Okay, so that, Debbie is our attorney, so what she says that's acceptable. That would have to come back to us too, if it's a full hearing, yeah. Since I'm not gonna be here, I don't care. Just kidding. See, I can cut up and joke today. Okay, so that's number 13. That's a change to number 13. So it would need to come back for a full hearing rather than just an other business item. So I agree with Thea on that. Let's see, number 15 is a new item which I think needs to be added, which would read, any refuse/garbage collection site located outside this main building, and I'm not sure that this would be there, but should there be one, shall be fully enclosed on 3 sides with a brick enclosure tall enough to screen any dumpsters from view, and it will also be gated. Further, no storage or overnight parking of vehicles, boats, campers, or trailers will be allowed on the site. So you can't store cars and campers and so forth outside the building on this site. Let's see. I have way too many notes here. I think that will do it. The rest of the recommendations from staff and Mr. Sam's stip letter, I think, are quite sufficient. So that will be my motion. We can do that? I mean, isn't that a DOT, a state DOT?
The county is also involved in that process also, Mr. Chairman. You know, it'd be my preference just to prohibit the billboard altogether.
Where is it in here? Where, on which stipulation is that mentioned?
I don't,
Because that's where I need to reference it. Number 11, let's see how it reads. Okay, the revised site plan depicts a proposed, I'm thinking on my feet here, proposed billboard. Okay, why don't we do this? Let's just delete on number 11, stipulation number 11. Let's delete the second sentence entirely, which begins, the revised site plan depicts a proposed billboard. Let's just delete that in its entirety. How about that?
could you read that? I'm sorry.
Well, there's number 11 has to do with the ground-based monument sign, which of course is standard. And then as a second sentence, it reads, the revised site plan depicts a proposed billboard site adjacent to I-285. However, that is not a part of this application, of these applications, and is signage that is subject to GDOT review and approval. If we just eliminate that entirely,
Why don't you just say that?
Just say no boards.
or should we say
Well-
more definitively?
Just make a stipulation, no billboards.
I don't think we can do that. I mean, I would prefer that it would say any proposed billboard would be subject to GDOT approval and the county code as to signage.
That's pretty much what it says. It says,
I don't have the most recent one in front of me, so I'm sorry,
the
I'm not reading
revised
that.
site plan depicts a proposed billboard site adjacent to I-285. However, that is not a part of this application and is signage that is subject to GDOT review and approval. That's what you just said.
Right. And I think that has to, I mean, if they want a billboard, I don't think that we can, as a zoning condition, prohibit a billboard. We have?
I need a consensus from you two before I do anything on that. We can leave it as it exists, which frankly I think is okay, but John, you're the expert and Debbie, you're the attorney, so what say you? Should we add a sentence behind that? No, we can't.
But before we get into this anymore, can I ask Mr. Sams a question since he's up at the front? Is this an off-premise sign, Mr. Sams, or is this a billboard for the property itself that advertises what's on the property?
Advertise what's on the property.
So this is not an off-premise sign. This is for your property. For your
Correct,
purpose.
and, you know, I know you didn't ask me to weigh in my legal opinion, but there's specific case law that says that you cannot prohibit another governing authority from doing one thing or another. If you want to eliminate it, it was surplusage put in there just to be transparent because they asked us to interface with GDOT and GDOT asked us to show it on.
Well, how about we just say this then? How about we just say all signage to meet Cobb County Code?
It says that.
Well, yeah.
The next sentence says, all signage shall comply with Cobb County sign code and ordinance, sign ordinance. That says that. I'm not sure we need to change anything.
Correct.
Turn your mic on, Judy.
And not for advertising for something else that's not on the property. I think
That's the intent, but obviously GDOT has to.
and they have the final say so. So I would withdraw adding no to the billboard.
I think that it's okay as presented,
Yes.
and I think we'll
agree.
just leave 11 alone. And let GDOT deal with it, and the county can weigh in at that time.
Okay,
John, you okay with that?
I'm fine.
Okay. Who's the old comedian that used to say, never mind?
Thank you. I have a quick question for Mr. Sams, since he's up there. Typically, we build these climate-controlled storage facilities for the neighborhoods. So why are you advertising on 285 with a billboard?
I'll defer to the marketing decisions of my client, who's been extremely successful I wasn't in the marketing part of it.
Okay, we've had a motion, we have had a second,
do have
correct?
one-
So let me call for the vote. Let's go.
I have one other thing. When you put the landscaping, you referred, I think, from the curb or the street or something like
Back of the
that.
curb.
I just want to make sure that we don't allow any plantings on the right of way. Because I'm not so sure you measured far enough or not. I don't know. I don't know how
The
big.
hill goes back at least 50 feet.
Right.
And then levels out. And my contention or my desire was just don't disturb that hill.
Okay. I just want to make sure we don't have plantings on
Well,
the
if
right
they
of way.
show up at plan review with a plan that shows plantings in the right of way, they won't allow it anyway. So I don't think we
Okay.
have to worry about that. Okay.
Okay, just
I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. We have a motion, we have a second. Call for the vote. So we're approved 4-1 with Ms. Powell against. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
long time getting there. We need to take a break. We're going to take a 50. Oh, I'm sorry. We need one more motion. We also have a special land use permit that goes with this. That would carry the same motion that we just had, exactly the same conditions. So that would be my motion. Do we have a second for the SLUP? Let's call for the vote on that. Be the same vote, 4-1 with Ms. Powell objecting. So that's the way it will be on the SLUP. So now we're going to take about a 15-minute break, and then we'll be back to continue. Thank you, folks. Okay, we're back after a brief break. We have, I believe, John, one more case to hear, so we'll just power through it. Normally, we would take a lunch break along about now, but I think we'll just keep going, see if we can't get this one resolved. So, John, you want to read it into the record for us, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Rezoning case Z22 Fortress Builders LLC. Request rezoning from R20 to RSL for the purpose of non-supportive senior living and land lots 124 and 125 of the 17th District. The property is located on the northeast and northwest or southwest sides of Harris Road and on the south side of Church Road. The applicant is present. Earlier, there were 13 people here in opposition and 5 people here in support. All those wishing to address the board, please come forward to be sworn in.
Turn this on whenever you're ready, Mr. Harper. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name's Skip Harper. I'm the managing member of the applicant, and I'm authorized to negotiate the terms of the reference case for the title holder, the McGinnis family. We have Mr. David McGinnis here in the audience with us. We're grateful to the McGinnis family for entrusting this development to us. They could have sold this property to any developer out there, including all the big nationals, and he knows that we'll do our best to do a high-quality development here. We are requesting the rezoning from 22.3 acres from R20 to RSL for the purpose of a age-restricted single-family neighborhood. When we first analyzed the property, Harris Road is the ridge. The property is located on either side of Harris Road, and it also fronts on Church Road. This is the break line for all the stormwater. The property gently flows towards Church Road to the north and southwest, south on the west side of Harris Road. This is one of the premier leftover properties in this area that had been developed in the 1950s and 60s. Rarely do we find one that has such gentle topography. The property currently has 2 homes on it, has the McGinnis house here, and it has Mrs. McGinnis's family home place, an older 1930s craftsman-style house on this side. When we considered what the property would best be used for and how it would best fit into the uses around us, we determined that this is in the low-density residential category, which allows a maximum of 2.5 units per acre. We're surrounded by R15 and R20 developments. Most of these properties were developed some time ago. There's a lot of aging housing stock in the area, and there are a lot of people that are aging in place out there. We've done a lot of development in this area, and we've done 4 active adult developments in close proximity here. We thought that this would be a wonderful place for that because of all the aging people in the area. However, we didn't think it would fit in with the typical RSL that most people think of, which might be an attached ranch condominium or duplexes or something like that. We felt like it was important that we design the property to look and feel like a typical single-family neighborhood with cul-de-sacs. So that is our intent, to do a traditional single-family neighborhood with a minimum of 20 foot between houses. The minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet, and the average is almost 16,000 square feet. So we felt like that would blend nicely with the uses around us. At first glance, our first land plan, we wanted to save the house, the 1930s Craftsman house. It was in our plan in a park area over here. After we did more investigation of the house, we determined that it had been added onto several times over the years, and that the basic form of the house had been altered beyond its historic architecture. The roof line had been changed. The load-bearing walls inside made small little rooms that wouldn't be conducive to a clubhouse. It's in pretty poor shape, and we felt like the positives of saving it for a clubhouse were outweighed by the cost and the burden that would be put on the homeowners association to maintain it, and the fact that it wasn't a great usable living room type environment for them. We're very sensitive to historic structures. We've been involved in a lot of historic preservation in the area. We preserved the Floyd House and turned it into a clubhouse. We were involved in the McAdoo House, the preservation of it, Lost Mountain Store, the Maxim Farmhouse. We've done pro bono work on the Concord Baptist Church, the Cheney House, and we're currently involved in the relocation of the Manning Cabin from Powder Springs to the Root House here in Marietta. So it really went against my grain not to save that house, but I wanted to give you the reason why we decided not to do that. After meeting during the pendency of the rezoning, we've had an opportunity to meet with some of the contiguous landowners, and we've had 2 public forum meetings with the opposition. During those meetings, we took into consideration their comments. There's been a lot written about this case, and we have been attentive to those issues. After meeting with staff and the district commissioner, we made minor modifications to our plan. Originally, the plan had 2 internal parks. We changed that to 4 parks flanking the entrance. We think we'll be able to make a bold statement on both sides. These mini parks will have a mail center on each side coming in the neighborhoods with 2 parallel parking places to make it convenient to pull over, get your mail, and move on. We've got gazebos located on the opposite flanking park. We'll have sidewalks on both sides of the road and create a nice little walking track throughout both sides of the neighborhood. As far as sanitary sewer goes, the opposition has been quite vocal about their opposition to sanitary sewer being served through the Williams property. We took that into consideration. At first glance, we thought that we would be required to go with gravity flow straight south for this tract and straight north for this tract. There's a manhole located in the right-of-way of Church Road, and we have determined, we just got our profile back from our engineers, that we can successfully take all of our sewer north and out to this manhole. So no access whatsoever will be needed for that sewer line down close to GB's Lake. So hopefully that'll be good news to those guys. Regarding our retention ponds, obviously they have to be at the low point on either side of the road. Again, this is the ridge and we're breaking both ways. This is the low point on this south property. There is a very well-defined ditch that becomes a small tributary that goes into GB's Lake. We've designed these of adequate size where there will not be, we don't anticipate there being any concrete walls. It'll be traditional earthen dams. We've given plenty of capacity here for water quality and stormwater management. The same on this one to the north. Dave Braden pointed out to us on this one on the north that we have inadequate piping going underneath Church Road and into a 1950s era subdivision here. And quite frankly, the storm drain is completely dysfunctional up here. What we propose to do is to have our outlet structure here close to Church Road, and then we're going to take it just up the road a little bit. We've already met with the gentleman that owns the property across the road who's currently his basement is being flooded. And we're going to acquire an easement from him that will take it straight down and intersect into an existing Cobb County storm drain easement there. So we're going to basically be correcting an existing problem off-site. So we're taking that into account, and we are willing to stipulate to that as well. These homes will be designed for active adult, age 55 and older residents. We think it'll be a low-impact neighborhood. Traffic will not be heavily impacted. The school system will not be heavily impacted. We're designing, and we have already built in this area and in several other areas, similar product to what we would like to do here. All the living area, these are ranch homes, and all the living areas are on the first floor. There's a bonus bedroom upstairs with a bathroom that can be finished or not. The houses range from 1,800 to 2,500 square feet. These will be priced from the 320s or 330s to the mid threes to potentially 400,000. This is a landscape of this similar product that we've just finished constructing on Hicks Road and up on Moon Station Road in the city of Kennesaw. So this is our product. It's been very well received. These are fee simple lots. The homeowner actually owns the lot, but the covenants mandate that the whole area is maintained by the homeowners association. So all the lawns, the buffers, and all those things will be maintained by the homeowners association. We'll be doing a berm along Harris Road, a nice landscape berm on both sides of the road. Yes, ma'am.
Your time has run.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just leave it at that and answer any questions you guys have later.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Let's hear from the opposition at this time. Come on up. Go right
Mr. Chairman,
ahead.
members of the Plan Commission, I'm Richard Calhoun. I represent GBW Investment Partners LLP and Chad Williams with reference to this application. The elimination of the sewer through our property is obviously a great relief. I still don't know that makes this an appropriate zoning for the area, though. The GBW property is 108 acres. It's one of the largest remaining tracts in Cobb County. It's been maintained by the Williams family for nearly 70 years as a undeveloped tract and more recently as horse stables. The drainage is still a concern to us because of the spring that feeds GB's Lake. We think that probably some more investigation of that is warranted. As I understand it, there's a detention pond in the Alexander Place subdivision that is basically unused, and that's where this drainage would flow. What we're concerned about is whether or not that's going to affect the spring that feeds GB's Lake, and that's something that is still of some concern to us. Obviously, the sewer was a lot worse because of the possibility of blasting, and we hope that there's not going to be any need to do any blasting on the subject property when that sewer is installed, because blasting and horses don't go so well together. And we've got 50 people that board their over 50 that horses boarded on that property. But maybe the larger picture here is, and this is something I think needs to be considered in every zoning case, is the difference between an unconstitutional taking of property in this case and a redevelopment of this property as something other than R20. We're only looking at probably, what, 3 houses for the southern tract, 6 houses total. That's a very thin margin. So if that's the only difference between taking their property, which is required to be shown in order to change the zoning of property, I'd say that that's setting a pretty low bar for people to come in here and say, well, I'd like to get 6 more houses, or I'd like to get 5 or 3 or 2 or 1. Where do you draw the line? You are, in effect, creating a precedent here for more dense development, and in particular, right next to a very unusual and unique piece of property in Cobb County, being that it's undeveloped and there's really nothing else like it. So we're not, like I said, we're relieved that we're probably not going to have to deal with a 1,000-foot long sewer easement through our property. We already have nearly a mile of it along GB's Lake, and there was blasting involved when that one was put in. So we're relieved in that respect, but we think that probably further review of the drainage and investigation is necessary to make sure that we don't disturb the lake or silt it up or kill off the spring that feeds it. That's still a concern to us in this case. With that, I'll turn that over. I think we've got some other speakers.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please. Give us your name, please.
My name's Chad Williams, and I'm one of the owners of GB's Lake and Stable, that is the 108-acre property that joins this property. We have worked very hard for, as Mr. Calhoun said, nearly 70 years to not only maintain the natural property that we have, but also improve it. We are very concerned about this water flow that would be coming onto our property. We were told that it was going to be all going into this one detention pond. Now, according to Mr. David Breeden of the county, he states that it's actually going to flow 3 ways. Some will go into the Pratt's property, some will flow onto the north end of our property, and some will go into this pond. There was an assumption that that pond would flow into a natural creek, but it isn't a creek, it is just a dry bed that would flow into the Alexander Place unused pond that then subsequently flows right into this natural spring that's about 30 feet deep in a canyon. Very, very fragile, very important part of the community because it is the main source of water for Cindy's Lake. Cindy's Lake has 24 homes that are on it, and it also is part of our property. So we have not received any information on plans on how that would work, any studies, any engineering documentation. And with it being such a fragile watershed, we have grave concern about that, especially since the county states that it would be flowing into different areas than what the developer had previously told us. We have The thing with our property is we feel like between our property, the Pratt's property, which is next to it, and then the Moore property, you're looking at nearly 150 acres. That would be one of the largest tracts that's undeveloped in this county. Commissioner Cupid has told us that there is a need in her district for green space. These are all properties that are currently green space and that would be more than compatible to continue to be green space. This is not a hardship case. The sellers have other opportunities that would not require this property to be rezoned, and we don't see that there is any actual need for a rezoning of this property. The developer has told us that there would not be a tree spared on this property, and it is full of hardwood trees, some of which are between 80 and 100 years old. When asked about the rendering that the developer showed us that showed certain areas of trees, he told us last Wednesday that it was just to make the drawing look pretty. That was his words, not mine. We don't understand why this would need to take place in this manner. They conveyed to us that the Hicks Road property that they recently developed was a great development. They have a lake on it, they have trails, and we said, well, will any of that be done on our property or on the Moore property? And they said no, because the lake and the trails were built or maintained on the Hicks Road property because they couldn't develop that piece anyways. So they said they could develop all of this. So they weren't doing the neighborhood a favor. They were just not able to use the land in the first place. We're very concerned about the original site drawings that they submitted. The quality of work doesn't seem to be there, considering, if you'll notice, the original site plan showed homes in the middle of Harris Road, homes on the Pratt property. And to me, if you can't do a better site plan than that to submit to the county for development, what else are you going to have to correct and deal with? No one in this community is in support of this. No one needs this, and we are more than glad to see this property preserved and help the McGinnis family in any way possible to see that that happens. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker, please. Give us your name, please.
I am Juanita Pratt, and this is very emotional for me. We live next door. We've built our home 46 years ago. I'm going to read this because I can't think while I'm here. Our home adjoins the subject property. Mrs. Moore was my friend, and during the years she had told me several times she was preserving her land for the benefit of her grandchildren. I totally respect that the executor of her estate has, after 5 or 6 years, finally decided to take action to benefit those children. My concern is the action the developer is attempting to take and the ways this action totally disrespects and intrudes on our entire neighborhood. Putting 45 homes in a concentrated area of an already dangerous road is not a good, safe thing to do, especially without egress or ingress lanes. Now I guess they're XL and sail, come and go on either side. After obtaining a copy of the first site plan presented to you by the developer, we met with the developer, and at that time they acknowledged there were some problems with the site plan. They were showing 7 lots coming into the middle of Harris Road, and 5 lots were coming onto our front yard, and a lot summary and site summary did not calculate on the property. We also discussed the water runoff that would be coming into our yard once the trees and foliage were removed from the property. The reason our home was built so far from the road was the runoff onto our property when there was heavy rain. After the land stopped being used as pasture and the trees and foliage grew, the existing pine straw, leaves, etc., now absorb the water except during exceptional rains. Our land is lower than the subject property. Once everything is cut and the absorbers are removed, I know there will be red, muddy stream across my front yard. Their plan showed no lanes to help make entering and exiting the development safer. Buffers and fencing were also discussed. Nothing was resolved, but they were very nice and said they would consider all these things we had discussed. I heard absolutely nothing from them until March 8th at Commissioner Cupid's town meeting, at which time the developer said to all who were there, and there were many of us who opposed this rezoning, that they would be happy to meet with anyone who wanted more information. I then read a letter that I had written to Commissioner Cupid, which said much of the same thing I'm telling you. On March 22nd, I received a letter from the developer addressed Dear Area Residents, giving me a bit of information on the development. Nothing to me personally regarding the items we had previously discussed, which they were considering from our previous meetings.
Juanita,
Included in this letter was
is
a new
up.
plan.
If you can wrap it up, please, ma'am.
All right. On Wednesday of last week, we met with Commissioner Cupid, Mr. Porter, and the developer. And we were told that just because we didn't want the rezoning was not a reason to deny it. We maintain that we have a good reason to have this property not rezoned. It will impact each of us in our own homes on a daily basis. The additional traffic in this concentrated area with a blind hill in front of the property is enough to reject it. Commissioner Cupid did suggest a new traffic study be done on the road. We have a right to have our homes and lives continue to be safe and enjoyable. Let them build with the same zoning most of us live with. There are a few R15 homes in our neighborhood, but let's not destroy every inch of this privacy.
Thank you, ma'am. We are completely out of time. I'm sorry. I think we've heard what we need to hear, and we know what the key issues are. So it's back to this board. Galt, I believe this is yours. You want to lead our discussion, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I will say, you know, a lot of us have been to the GB property before that Chad spoke of. We had a cell tower application a few years ago, so a lot of us got out and walked on the property and went all around this property at that time. And of course, I've been back in that area since then, and I certainly understand why people would love to see this property remain undeveloped. You know, I get that. I get that if you develop it, there's going to be more traffic. It's going to disturb the wildlife, the water flow, all of those things. But, you know, I think much like the last case, you know, it's not a matter before us that we can say, you got to leave the property undeveloped. That's, you know, the property owner has property rights. It's zoned R20. The staff has estimated that they could do 39 lots with R20. The RSL's requesting 45 lots at an average lot size over 15,000 square feet and a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. You know, some of these lots are 20-some thousand square feet, just the way it lays out. Now, in looking at the plan, one of the things I saw was if you were to develop this R20, you'd more than likely end up putting some driveways on Harris Road, maybe driveways on Church, because to maximize the development, you don't want to put a lot of interior roads if you're putting in 20,000 square foot lots, and there's already a lot of roadway here. And I don't think anybody would want a bunch of driveways on either one of those roads. So this development pulls all the driveways internal to the project, which I think's, you know, one of the benefits. Often we sit here and go, is what it's currently zoned at better or worse than what it could be zoned at? Is this an improvement for the community? And one of the things you look at is also intensity. And while this may have a little bit more density at 2.0, which the R20 would typically give you 1.75 units per acre. This has 2 units per acre. The R15, which is almost across the street, just slightly down down the street. Average on that would be about 2.1 units per acre. So we're right between an R20 and an R15 as far as the density. So I wanted to kind of put that out there as, you know, I wish we had the power to say, leave this property, don't develop it. But the reality is there's a developer involved who's probably going to develop it. Whether it gets developed RSL or R20, R20 is going to result in a lot bigger homes, a lot more traffic. And we can have DOT come up in a little bit and talk about the traffic, but this probably yields half the amount of traffic. So when you look at density versus intensity, a senior living is a lot less intense. It's one reason why our code, when it was written, allowed for senior developments like this to go up to 5 units per acre, even in areas that were designated as low-density residential by our future land use, which typically allows, if you're doing a residential subdivision, only up to 2.5 units per acre. So they looked at it at the time as we can allow twice the density because the intensity is so much less of this kind of use. And I will say, on the issue of clear cutting, you know, I'm going to ask the developer to come back up, but there's buffers that are going to be left. Additionally, it's my understanding, and the developer can speak to this more, that a lot of these lots, the whole lot's not going to be cleared because, you know, in the development on Hicks Road, the average building lot was 7,500 square feet. That was a R15 OSC, which I see there's an R15 OSC directly across the street from this property on Church. That allows smaller lots and then set aside land for conservation, such as they did there with the lake and that. They may have been able to do, the lake they couldn't have touched, but there was more usable land on that property that they didn't develop that could have been developed. I was here when we zoned that case, but doing it in that case in what's called an open space community allowed them to go with smaller lots, 7,500 square foot lots, and then set aside the other 7,500 essentially that it was an R15. So I want to keep that in mind. This isn't going to be clear cut, I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination, but with kind of those opening comments, I'm going to ask Skip to come back up. I know you kind of ran out of time and we cut you off when you were starting to talk about the buffers and the, you know, trees and things like that. So I want to give you a little bit of time so everybody gets information on that.
We do not intend to cut every tree off, as has been reported. As a matter of fact, a lot of these lots that are very deep will have more trees than what's depicted there. This is an artist rendering, and he could have added a lot more trees, so I'm sorry that is not a perfect depiction. We are required to have a minimum of a 20-foot buffer around the entire property to be maintained by the homeowners association. In addition, I didn't get to say either that contiguous to the Pratt property, we'll be doing a privacy fence as well as the buffer, 6-foot wooden privacy fence. Same thing on the Sutton property and on the other property, I can't see it from here, but the one. Huggins
okay.
property, yes, sir, we'll buffer those as well. But we do not intend to cut every tree off the property. And as a matter of fact, most of these homes will be built on slab, but the ones on the southern cul-de-sacs, I anticipate that those will probably be basements down there just to allow for the step down in the transition to the Williams property.
Okay, and as far as the buffers on where it backs up to other lots, they're either going to be a naturally maintained buffer if there's considerable vegetation there. They may be naturally maintained with some enhancements if there's a few trees that need to be planted to make the buffer a little bit better. Or if there's really not much of a buffer, you'll plant a buffer. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, then along the frontages on Church Road and on Harris Road, you're going to put in a berm and plant double row buffers there, right?
Yes, sir. There'll be a 20-foot landscape buffer along there, including that berm.
So which will help hide when you go down the road. You won't be looking right at the back of people's houses, which you could if it's R20. There's no requirement. If this is R20, there is no buffer requirement whatsoever. They don't have to put in any to any of these properties, and they don't have to put any along the roads. They just go in and make 20,000 square foot lots and do it. So that's why I want to highlight when you're comparing, is this better or worse than what it's already zoned for the community? That's, one of the things I look at. You spoke to the detention already, so that was a question.
Can I add one thing to that,
Sure.
Mr. Porter? I failed to state that we'll be doing a pre and post development study of GB's Lake and the Priest Lake, or the
Cindy's Lake and Pratt.
Pratt's Lake, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, so
I'm
the
not
staff.
I'd like to follow that tributary. I believe it goes into GB's, and wherever that discharge point is, that's where the study should be done. I'm not so sure that it's Cindy's Lake. I think the staff stated that, but I think we need to follow that tributary and wherever that dumps out, and I believe it's into GB's, but.
Well, almost looked like to me, maybe it went to both.
Okay.
But I'm no expert on that whatsoever. Right. But you're willing, if it's determined that it goes to GB's Lake, you'll do a
Yes,
study,
sir.
assuming that Mr. Williams lets you go on the property, do the study.
Right.
Which I assume he would, because it's for his protection. Staff had Cindy's Lake and Pratt Lake in there, but it does look like GB's probably ought to be included in that. And we can have stormwater management look into that a little bit more. We talked about the drainage easement already, so you covered that. You covered sewer easements. During our community meeting, it was noted that, and these are Cobb DOT numbers, that Harris Road had a more recent 2016 count, but Church Road, the count was for 2006. And I think Commissioner Cupid may have requested staff to update that Church Road study, and I would assume that wasn't done this quickly. But there is no access to Church Road. So the cars aren't going to directly flow there. And, the other thing is the amount of traffic, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. You've agreed to, and I don't know that the Pratts realized it till you just said it, that you agreed to put a privacy fence down their property line. So I know that was a concern to them. They have animals and things like that, and they just want their privacy too. Trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to go through with you. I did, just so you know, I got all the emails. I went through it in detail. I wanted to hit a few. We've hit the sewer easement that Chad had, the detention pond, the flow of the detention pond. All that gets engineered during the plan review. They're not required to engineer all that just for zoning, to have a basic idea where it goes, but not the actual engineering. So that will be in more detail later. Talked about traffic, and we're going to do a little bit more. The wildlife, as I said, I think we would love to have the property preserved, but that's just not an option before us. We're looking at, is it R20 or is it RSL? And that goes to the forest land as well. The no benefit to the school system. Well, it's true, once people reach 62 years, they can get an exemption from paying the school tax. Some of the people will be under 62, so they'll pay, but also, you know, RSL and 55 shouldn't really be sending a lot of kids to the schools, so it's not the burden that R20 would be on the schools. So they may not be getting extra tax dollars, but they also aren't getting extra kids. So, you know, we often have the school system up here saying, don't approve this because we have no room for these kids. So that's not the case in this one. You know, there is infringing on the current agricultural activities, and I think, you know, that's, you still have the right to use your property for what you're using it for as long as it's allowed by county ordinance. But it doesn't take away, you can't stop somebody from using their property like they want to just because, you know, you don't think that would be the buffers we've discussed. You know, as far as the zoning process and that, you know, the applicant has had community meetings and reached out, but really what they're required to do is send out a letter to you informing you of this hearing and the Board of Commissioners hearing. That's what they're required to do. Anything else they do is above and beyond that. And you know, we always encourage people to do it, and they have done it. But they don't have to have 20 meetings and meet with each person individually. There's nothing in the ordinance that requires them to do those kind of things. We've talked about the heritage history of the house and why it's not being saved. And, you know, that, so I think that kind of covers the basic issues. I think I'm going to ask DOT to come up.
Let me ask a quick question. I'm not sure
Sure.
Skip will know the answer to this. It may be a question for stormwater management. Where is this? Chad mentioned a spring that feeds his family's lake, GB's lake. Where is that spring? He was very concerned.
It's a huge drainage basin that feeds GB's lake. So there may be a spring just off our site, and south of it, there's a very defined ditch. I think he called it a ravine, and it's probably somewhere in there. But according to what I see, and you see the blue line map on the aerial photo, it does not go into Alexander Farms neighborhood. It skirts along behind it. And I think that at some point in that ravine or in that ditch, which would naturally carry any stormwater, probably there's a spring in there that it becomes an active stream. I think that's what he's referring to.
That sound right, Chad? You can just nod. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
I have a quick question. While you're up there, there's been a lot of conversation about the forest, the 100-year-old trees and all of that. From your perspective, and you mentioned that not all the trees would come down, especially with the larger lots. Have you done a tree survey to see if there are any of these, you know, 100-year-old trees and tried to work your plan around that, or has that not been the case?
No, ma'am, we don't typically do that until full engineering plans, but we have not done a tree study. I anticipate that around the perimeter will be where most of the trees would be saved.
Okay. Thank you.
You want DOT?
Yeah, I'm just going to have DOT. Can you just talk a little, you can give your name if you want.
Amy Diaz, DOT.
Ashley White, DOT.
Can you just talk about a little bit of the differences that the traffic manuals and all the studies show between the amount of trips per day from a typical residential subdivision, an R20 kind of subdivision, and an RSL?
Basically, for an RSL, it's about a third of the trips per day as a typical single-family home. It's a little bit even less than that in the peak hours, especially during the PM peak hour. This is all based on empirical data. You can infer from that that basically that people that don't have to are avoiding the peak hour trips. So.
Okay, so you would expect that the 45 home development would yield a lot less traffic at 45 RSL homes than 39 single-family homes.
Yeah, so go ahead and do
Yeah,
that.
we just ran a data actually, and so this development will generate 10 AM peak hour trips and 12 PM peak hour trips, which is relatively low, and 166 daily trips.
Okay, and at 39 for,
Hold on a second.
it's, yeah. I was expecting we'd end up with at least a 50% traffic reduction, if not more.
Yeah, there we go. So for 39 regular single-family homes, that's 29 AM trips, 39 PM trips, and 371 daily trips.
So it's, like you said, about a third.
Yes.
So it's far less intense, the traffic. I know everybody's concerned about traffic, and if that's the big concern, the RSL should be a lot more desirable than the R20 regular subdivision as far as traffic. So that's, anybody else have any questions for DOT? Okay, that's good. Anybody else want to make any comments before I make a
Do we
motion?
want to talk about, the drainage issues seem to be on everybody's mind. Are we going to talk about?
Oh, yeah, let's have stormwater come up. Thank you.
So you thought you were going to dodge a bullet, didn't you?
I almost lucked out. I'm Andrew Heath. I'm with Stormwater Management. I'm just filling in for David Braden today.
Yeah, and I know that puts you in a little bit of a difficult position, but as far as the stormwater goes, and the southern track south of Harris Road, that seems to be the one that's of the most interest here. My understanding is the water is going to flow essentially three ways. Most of it's going to go to the detention pond, but some natural will, I guess, sheet flow to the south and to the west. Is that?
That's right. And in the existing condition, the current graphic that's shown doesn't really illustrate that clearly, but in the existing condition, some goes now to the west, some goes more to the south, and some goes to the east. And so in the developed condition, basically more of that drainage is going to be captured to go to the pond. So then the idea being that there will be now less drainage to the west and to the south, and then more will go to that pond.
Okay, but then that sits in the pond and is released slowly.
That's
correct?
Right.
So that it's not creating a flow. Would they be required to obtain any drainage easements for that pond? Or do you know? You may not know the answer off the top of your head.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar. I believe that's the Alexander Farm subdivision, I believe, to the east. I've forgotten the exact name.
Yeah.
There is a small detention pond that's there, and so I'm sure there are some easements that are associated with that. But we do have some concerns. I believe the date on that plat was 1989, I think. So we're somewhat concerned that that detention pond was probably designed under a much older standard. And so we have some concerns about maybe discharging this pond to that one. And so it could be that we want to work with, Mr. Harper and the applicant to make sure that that's the best discharge location there. But as far as the exact presence of the easements, honestly, I'd have to look at the plat to be sure.
Okay, but that's all something you handle at plan review, and
Yeah.
if you require easements, they have to get it or they can't build it, right?
That's right.
So that's an important part, and we know Mr. Harper already talked about the easements that he needs and has worked on for the northern pond, so I don't think that's the issue at this time. And do you know about the staff recommendations had studying Pratt Lake and Cindy's Lake, but didn't have GB's Lake? Do you?
Yeah, and there could be some naming there because there were multiple names. It could be that the names are wrong there. But, you know, with respect to doing the lake study, of course, we would want to study the one that we're draining to. So we would do that.
Okay, okay. Any other questions regarding that?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I just, excuse me, to echo what I think you were saying, Paul, this to me represents just about the best possible way to develop this property. You're going to get buffers. You're going to get less than half the traffic that you otherwise would get. And you're going to have great houses that, you know, Fortress Builders has a reputation for doing exactly what they said they were going to do. And this is going to be a great development, I think.
No impact on the schools?
And no impact on the schools, right?
I just have a quick question of staff. In the code, it says that non-supportive RSL must be on an arterial roadway, and Harris is a collector. And under the zoning division comments, it says they can be located along an arterial or collector road as defined by the Cobb County Major Thoroughfare Plan.
Okay. What it is in the code is if the project is located on an arterial road, they can go up to 5 units per acre. If it's located on the collector, they can go up to 4 units per acre. This one's.
I'm sorry.
If the project's located on an arterial roadway, they can go up to 5 units per acre. If it's located on the collector road, they can go up to 4 units per acre. Where we're less than 2.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, gone.
Okay. With that, and I think you can sense by now that I clearly feel like this is better than an R20 development for the property. And, you know, we look at these things all the time. I'm going to make the following recommendation, that we recommend approval of Z22 subject to all the following. All staff comments and recommendations not otherwise in conflict. Site plan received March 28, 2018 with the following changes. All buffers along Harris Road and Church Road, currently shown as 10 feet wide, to be 20 feet wide landscape buffers with berm. All buffers shown on the site plan as undisturbed or planted buffer to be naturally maintained, enhanced naturally maintained, or planted buffers. And then all stipulations in the letter from Skip Harper dated March 29th, 2018, not otherwise in conflict, with the following changes. A, on item number 7, delete all references to prices. That's something we just don't allow. We don't get into setting prices. And that change. And then it's not stated, but Mr. Harper stated that, so we'll make it sidewalks to be provided on both sides of all interior streets. Let's see, the DOT has a no access to Church, but I also want to make sure we have that on Harris for individual lots. A no access agreement for lots along Church Road and Harris Road. They aren't really proposing any, but I don't want to see somebody try and park their boat in or make a driveway. Elevations to be substantially similar to the elevations shown today, because we didn't get any district commissioner to approve final elevations. Leave that one out. And I'm not going to worry about that one either. The buffers along Church Road and Harris Road to have a minimum of 2 rows of plantings for the purpose of visual screening. County arborist and district commissioner to approve buffer plan. For the buffers identified as naturally maintained, enhanced naturally maintained, or planted buffer, the county arborist approved the type of buffer and buffer plan. Landscaping for the for visual screening to be provided for the detention ponds, county arborist to approve the landscaping plan. And then we want to add GB Lakes as one of the lakes to have a study in addition to Pratt and Cindy's Lake. And I'll put a condition unless stormwater management determines that one of those lakes don't need to be studied. And then the district commissioner may approve minor modifications except for those that increase the density, cause a reduction in the size of an approved buffer, cause the relocation of a structure closer to the property line of an adjacent property, change an access location to a different roadway, change that is in conflict with an express stipulation or condition of zoning, or requires a variance or violates Cobb County ordinance. That's the motion.
We have a motion and second for Ms. Williams. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. So that's approved 5-0. Yes, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Skip, very much. We need to approve, John, that's our last case, I believe. Need to approve some minutes for March 14th and March the 26th. Can I get a motion to do that?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second on the minutes. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented? So the minutes are approved 5-0, Madam Clerk. And I think we have no further business, so we stand adjourned at 12:50.